Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. I'm Grace, 34. The ranger at Kisatchie National Forest refused to sell me a map. Now I know why. The Louisiana heat clung to everything that September afternoon when I pulled my 23-foot Winnebago into the Longleaf Vista campground about 40 miles southeast of Natchitoches. The place advertised itself as primitive camping. No hookups, no cell service, just you and the pines. Perfect, I'd thought, for what I needed. 3 weeks away from Portland, away from Derek's lawyers and the empty house and my mother's concerned phone calls that always ended with, "Maybe you should see someone, Gracie." I didn't need someone. I needed silence. The ranger station sat at the entrance, a weathered building that looked like it had been standing since the WPA built half of Louisiana. Inside, the air conditioner wheezed against the humidity. An old man sat behind the counter, skin like tanned leather, eyes so pale they were almost colorless. His name tag read, Boudreaux. "Map of the trails," I said, pulling out my wallet. He looked at me for a long moment. Not at my wallet. At me. At my face, my hands, my hiking boots that still had Portland mud on them. "Don't got any," he said finally. "The website said, website's wrong." He turned back to a crossword puzzle, pencil scratching. "Anyway, you don't need a map. 3 trails. They all loop back. Can't get lost." Something in his tone made my skin prickle, but I was tired from 18 hours of driving and not in the mood to argue with Cajun country bureaucracy. I paid for 3 nights, took my campground receipt, and left. The Winnebago bumped along the dirt road deeper into the forest. Longleaf pines towered on both sides, their trunks straight as columns, their canopy filtering the late afternoon sun into golden shafts. Beautiful. Peaceful. Exactly what I'd driven halfway across the country to find. Site 7 sat at the end of the camping loop, isolated from the other sites by a good quarter-mile of forest. I backed the RV into position, leveled it, and stood outside for a moment, just breathing. The air smelled of pine sap and distant rain. Somewhere far off, a bird called, a strange warbling sound I didn't recognize. I spent the first evening getting settled. Folding chairs set up outside, propane connected, bear canister secured. I'd done this before, countless times with Derek, back when we still did things together, back when I could look at him without seeing her lipstick on his collar. Stop it, Grace. The sun set fast, the way it does in the south. One moment, golden light. The next, a purple dusk that thickened into darkness. I built a fire in the metal ring, more for company than warmth. The flames caught quickly, hungry in the dry wood. I sat watching them, a beer warming in my hand, letting the crackle and pop fill the silence in my head. That's when I noticed the fire was wrong. Not wrong, exactly, just off. The flames moved normally enough, but occasionally, just for a second, they seemed to form shapes. A hand reaching, a face turning. I blinked and they were just flames again. Orange and yellow and perfectly ordinary. Too much driving, I thought. Too much stress. Too much everything. I finished the beer and went inside. The RV felt smaller at night, the walls closer. I changed into sleep clothes and climbed into the bed over the cab, but sleep wouldn't come. Every sound seemed amplified. The ping of the propane line, the creak of the frame settling, and underneath it all, barely audible, a sound like rustling, like something moving through dry leaves. I told myself it was wind. I told myself it was animals. I told myself a lot of things before I finally fell asleep sometime after midnight. I woke to sunlight and birdsong and felt ridiculous about the night before. Morning has a way of making darkness seem dramatic, and I've always been too practical for dramatics. That's what Derek used to say anyway, usually right before criticizing me for not being spontaneous enough, not being fun enough, not being enough. I made coffee on the camp stove and ate granola while planning my day. The ranger had mentioned 3 trails. No map, but how hard could it be? I'd brought my own compass, my GPS watch, and I'd hiked more difficult terrain than Louisiana flatland. The trailhead started just past Site 9, marked by a weathered wooden sign that read Longleaf Loop, 5 miles. The trail was well maintained at first, a clear path through the pines. Sunlight dappled the ground. Wildflowers bloomed in the understory. I walked for maybe 20 minutes before I realized I hadn't seen any trail markers. No blazes on the trees. No signs. Nothing indicating I was on an official trail except the packed dirt under my feet. I checked my GPS watch. The satellite signal flickered. Weak. The map function showed my location as a blue dot in a field of gray. No topography loaded. No trail marked. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I'd find. No service. No saved maps because I'd trusted the website about trail information being available at the ranger station. Fine. The ranger said the trails loop back. Just keep walking. Another 20 minutes and the trail forked. Left or right, no indication which was correct. I chose right, marking the decision in my mind. The pines grew denser here, their shadows longer. The undergrowth thickened. Palmetto fronds scraped against my legs. My watch said I'd gone 3 miles when I came to another fork. This one had 3 options: left, right, or straight ahead into what looked like barely maintained path. The logical choice was straight, continuing what seemed to be the main trail. But something about it felt wrong. The shadows there looked deeper, colder despite the heat. I went left instead. The forest changed. Subtly at first, the pines giving way to hardwoods, live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The air grew heavier, harder to breathe, and quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no insects. Just my footsteps and my breathing and the occasional crack of a branch breaking under my boots. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I saw the first map. It was nailed to a tree, just off the trail. An actual paper map, yellowed and curling at the edges. A map of the trails I'd been asking for. I stepped closer, relief washing over me. The map showed 3 trails, just like the ranger had said. The Longleaf Loop I was supposedly on, the Bayou Trail to the south, and the Missionary Ridge Trail to the north. Simple enough. Except, I looked at it again, leaning closer. The trails were drawn in what looked like pencil. Hand-drawn, not printed. And they didn't form loops. They spiraled. All 3 of them spiraled inward to a central point marked with a small X. Underneath, in handwriting so faded I had to squint to read it. Don't follow the markers. There were no markers. There hadn't been any markers since I started. I pulled out my phone to take a picture. The screen flickered on, showing 3:47 p.m. I snapped the photo, but when I looked at it, the image was corrupted. Just static and strange color bands. I tried again. Same result. When I looked up, the map had changed. Not dramatically, just different. The spirals were tighter now. The X in the center was darker, like someone had pressed harder with the pencil, and the writing underneath had new words. They fold the forest at night. My hands started shaking. I looked away, counted to 5, looked back. The map was gone. Just tree bark, no nail holes, no sign anything had ever been there. I ran. Not smart, not safe, but I ran anyway, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping my face. My rational mind screamed that I was panicking over nothing. Stress hallucinations, lack of sleep, but my instincts were older and smarter and they said, run. I burst back onto what I thought was the main trail and stopped, gasping. The path looked different, narrower. The trees on either side leaned inward like they were watching. My GPS watch showed 7.2 miles walked, which was impossible. I'd been out for maybe 2 hours. The sun was setting. That was impossible too. It had been mid-afternoon, but the light filtering through the canopy was definitely golden orange, definitely evening light, and the shadows were definitely lengthening in that way they only do near dusk. I chose a direction and walked fast, trying to retrace my steps. The trail forked. I didn't remember this fork. Forked again. Or was it the same fork? The trees all looked identical, tall pines with that distinctive longleaf pattern, but I couldn't orient myself. My compass needle spun lazy circles, never settling. The light faded. I don't know when exactly I accepted I was spending the night out here. Maybe when the last of the sun disappeared and the forest went from dim to dark in the space of minutes. Maybe when my flashlight clicked on and showed the trail ahead, just ending. Not at a clearing or a junction, just ending at a wall of underbrush and trees like it had never existed beyond this point. I turned around. The trail behind me was gone too. The trees had moved closer. No, trees don't move. Trees don't move. I was disoriented, confused, scared, but trees don't move. Except I was standing in a space maybe 10 feet across, surrounded by pine trunks, and I knew that space had been larger a moment ago, that I'd walked through an open area, that the trees had been farther apart. Something rustled in the darkness beyond my flashlight beam. I spun toward it, the light catching nothing but trees and shadows and the pale flutter of something that might have been a moth, or might have been paper, or might have been a hand waving. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is someone there?" The rustling stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard breathing. Not mine. Slower, deeper, coming from multiple directions at once. I picked a direction at random and pushed through the underbrush, branches tearing at my clothes. Thorns raked my arms. A palmetto frond cut my cheek, but I broke through into another open space, this one with a trail, an actual trail with packed dirt. My flashlight beam showed footprints in the dust. Boot prints. My boot prints, the tread pattern unmistakable, but they were leading in both directions. Like I'd walked this trail going both ways. Like I'd passed this spot from 2 different directions. The breathing grew louder. I ran again, flashlight bouncing, my shadow jerking on the trees. The trail curved, forked, curved again. I took turns without thinking, guided only by panic and the desperate need to put distance between me and that breathing sound. Until I came to a clearing and stopped dead. There was a fire burning. A small campfire in a metal ring, flames crackling cheerfully. And next to it, sitting in a folding chair that looked exactly like mine, was a woman. She was reading a book by firelight. She looked up when my flashlight found her and smiled. "Oh, good. I was wondering when you'd arrive." Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost sobbed. Another camper. Another person. I wasn't alone. "Thank God," I said, stepping into the clearing. "I got lost on the trails and my GPS isn't working and—" I stopped. The woman was still smiling at me, but her eyes weren't. Her eyes were flat and dark and reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's eyes, like there was nothing behind them but empty space. And she was wearing my jacket, the purple North Face jacket I'd left in the RV. "You should sit," she said, gesturing to another chair. My chair. The one I'd set up outside my RV. "The fire's nice tonight." I took a step back. "Who are you?" "I'm Grace," she said. She said it in my voice. My exact voice, with the same slight rasp I get when I'm tired. 34. Came to Kisatchie National Forest for quiet. She tilted her head, that smile never wavering. "Didn't you?" The fire behind her flared higher. In the light I could see the clearing wasn't empty. There were shapes at the edges, just beyond the firelight. People-shaped, sitting in chairs, standing between trees, all perfectly still, all watching, all wearing versions of my clothes. My purple jacket, my hiking boots, my gray t-shirt with the coffee stain on the hem. 7, 8, maybe a dozen figures, all dressed like me, all with my hair color, all with faces I couldn't quite see in the shadows. "This is where you've been walking toward," the woman by the fire said. "All day, since you took the right fork at the first junction. This is the center." She gestured around the clearing. "This is where the trails end. I want to leave." My voice was barely a whisper. "You can't leave." The map said it, didn't it? They fold the forest at night. The trails fold in. They lead here. They always lead here. She stood up slowly. "And once you're here, you stay. You join. You become one of us. The figures at the edge of the clearing moved closer. In the firelight, I could see their faces now. They all looked like me. Exact copies except their eyes. Their eyes were all that same flat darkness reflecting light but holding none. "We've been waiting," one of them said in my voice. "We've been here a long time," said another. "We missed ourselves," said a third, and they all laughed, the sound perfectly synchronized, perfectly identical. I backed away, flashlight swinging wildly. The beam caught something at the edge of the clearing. A sign, half buried in pine needles. I could just make out the words. Site 7, Longleaf Vista. This was my campsite. Or it had been. Or it was a version of it. Folded somehow into this dark center where the woman things wearing my face gathered around a fire that burned but gave no real warmth. The not-me by the fire shook her head sadly. "You can run." The last one ran too. For 3 days she ran, but the forest is folded now. Every trail leads here, every path circles back. You'll understand soon. You'll join us. You'll become what you're meant to become. "What are you?" I demanded. She smiled wider, too wide. Her mouth stretched past where a mouth should end. "We're you, Grace. We're every version of you that the forest has collected. Every iteration that walked into Kisachi looking for quiet, looking to escape, looking to disappear." She stepped closer. "And you know what? You get exactly what you came for. You disappear. Into us. Into the fold." I turned and ran into the forest. Behind me, I heard them follow. Not running. Walking. Slow, synchronized steps. They didn't need to run. They'd told me the truth. Every path led back. I could feel it now. The way the forest bent around me. The way the trails I took seemed to curve even when they ran straight. My flashlight died. I shook it frantically and it flickered back to life, the beam growing weaker. I crashed through underbrush, thorns tearing my skin. Blood ran hot down my arms. My lungs burned. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, until I collapsed against a pine tree, gasping, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. In the darkness, I heard them coming, footsteps from every direction, converging. And voices, my voice, multiplied, speaking in unison. "You can't leave. We tried. We all tried. But the forest keeps what it takes." My flashlight died completely. In the absolute darkness, I felt hands touch my shoulders, my arms, my face. Gentle touches, almost tender, dozens of hands all at once, and whispers in my ear, "Join us. Fold with us. Become complete." I screamed and shoved away, stumbling forward, my hands outstretched. I hit something hard, a tree trunk, and felt my way around it. Moved forward into nothing but darkness and hands reaching and voices calling and light. Sudden, blinding light. I fell forward onto gravel. Real gravel, the kind that exists in the real world and cuts your palms when you land on it. Above me, fluorescent lights buzzed. I looked up, gasping. Blood and dirt covering my arms and face. The ranger station. I was lying in the parking lot of the ranger station. Inside, through the window, I could see old Boudreau at his desk. He looked up slowly, met my eyes, and there was no surprise in his face. Only resignation. And sadness. He stood and walked to the door, opened it. "You made it out," he said quietly. "That's rare." I couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but kneel there shaking. "The forest folded 3 days ago," he continued. "September 7th, just after dusk. It happens sometimes when certain conditions are met. The trails fold in on themselves. Time gets strange. And if you're inside when it happens," he trailed off. "Most don't make it out." What were they? I finally managed. Reflections. Echoes. Every choice you didn't make, every path you didn't take, every version of you that could have existed. The fold collects them, gives them form, traps them. He helped me to my feet. "You got lucky. Found a weak point in the fold. Usually doesn't break until dawn on the 3rd day. 3 days?" I looked at my watch. The date read September 10th. I'd entered the forest on September 7th. My RV. Gone, he said. They took it apart. That's what they do. They take everything that belongs to whoever gets caught in the fold. Make copies. Use them to lure others in. He walked back inside and returned with a first aid kit. You should clean those cuts. I let him lead me inside, let him bandage my torn arms and face, let him talk about the history of the forest and the old stories the Choctaw told about places where the world folded in on itself and trapped spirits that looked like people but weren't. I barely heard him. I was remembering those faces, those versions of me with their empty eyes and their synchronized movements and their patient, eternal waiting. "Why didn't you warn me?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me not to go?" He looked at me with those pale, sad eyes. "Would you have listened? You came here to disappear, yeah? To escape, to find quiet. The forest gives people what they want. It just gives it to them in ways they don't expect." He was right. I wouldn't have listened. I'd wanted to disappear. I almost did. Permanently. Boudreaux drove me to the nearest town, let me use his phone to call for help. I sat in a diner for 6 hours waiting for my mother to drive down from Shreveport, drinking coffee and watching the sun move across the sky and trying not to think about those hands touching my face in the darkness. When Mom arrived, I told her I'd gotten lost on the trails. Equipment failure. GPS glitch. Got turned around. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push. She just held me while I cried in the parking lot of a Louisiana diner, held me like I was a child again, and for once, I let her. We drove back to Portland. I moved back into my mother's house because the idea of being alone made my hands shake. I saw someone, like Mom had wanted, a therapist who specialized in trauma. I told her edited versions of what happened, lost in the woods, hallucinations from stress, 3 days of survival horror. She nodded and prescribed medication and told me it would get better. It didn't get better. Because every night when I close my eyes, I see them. Those versions of me sitting around the fire. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, when I look in a mirror, my reflection's eyes are just a little too dark, a little too flat. Like something else is looking out. And I know that somewhere in Kisatchie National Forest, in a place where the trails fold in on themselves, there's a clearing. And in that clearing, there's a fire burning. And around that fire, women who look exactly like me are sitting in chairs that used to belong to me, wearing clothes that used to be mine, waiting for the next version of Grace to walk into the forest looking for quiet, waiting to fold her in. The map was right. They fold the forest at night. And once you're inside the fold, part of you never leaves. Part of you stays there forever, multiplying, echoing, becoming one more iteration of yourself trapped in an endless loop of what could have been. I'm Grace. I'm 34. The ranger at Kisatchie National Forest refused to sell me a map. Now I know why. Because maps don't matter in places where the forest decides the path, where every trail leads to the same center, where the only way out is luck and dawn and the desperate hope that you can outrun your own reflection before it catches up and wears your face forever. I got out, but I left something behind. I can feel it, a hollow space inside me where something used to be, a missing piece. And on the worst nights when the darkness is complete and the silence is total, I hear them calling, my voice, multiple versions of it, synchronized, patient. Come back, Grace. Come back and fold with us. Come back and become complete. I won't go back. I can't go back. But sometimes, when I'm not paying attention, I catch myself packing a bag, planning a route, looking up directions to Kisatchie National Forest, and I have to stop and remind myself why that's wrong, why I can't return, because the forest keeps what it takes, and it took enough of me already. The rest I have to keep for myself, however hollow it feels, however incomplete. I'm Grace. I'm 34, and I survived the fold. But I'm not sure how much of me came back. Story 2. My name is William. I'm 34. At Tongass National Forest in southeastern Alaska, the birds flew backwards. I noticed it on the second morning, standing outside our rented RV with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. A raven, big, glossy black thing, lifted off from a spruce branch and flew in reverse, wings beating forward, tail leading, until it disappeared into the canopy. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, told myself I was still half asleep. But then I saw it again. And again. I'd come to Tongass with my girlfriend Marissa and her younger brother Derek for what was supposed to be a healing trip. Marissa and I had been together 3 years, and the last 6 months had been rough. Her mother's slow death from cancer, my job layoff, the weight of too many bills and too many silences between us. Derek, 26 and fresh out of a bad breakup, had needed an escape too. So we'd pooled our money, rented a modest RV, and driven north to lose ourselves in the largest national forest in the United States. 17 million acres of temperate rainforest, glacier-carved fjords, and isolation so complete you could scream and nobody would hear. We'd parked at a dispersed camping area off Forest Road 6235, about 40 miles from the nearest town of Wrangell. The site was unofficial, just a widening in the gravel road where the Forest Service didn't mind if you stayed a few nights. Hemlocks and Sitka spruce towered above us, their trunks wrapped in moss so thick it looked like green fur. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, that rich rot of a forest that's been breathing for thousands of years. It was beautiful. It was suffocating. Marissa was still asleep inside the RV. Derek had gone for a walk an hour earlier with his camera, hoping to catch some wildlife shots in the early morning light. I'd stayed behind, enjoying the rare solitude, listening to the drip, drip, drip of condensation falling from the trees. That's when I saw the raven. I watched the sky for another 10 minutes, telling myself I was wrong, that it was a trick of perspective or fatigue. But then a cluster of small birds, juncos maybe, burst from the underbrush and flew backward across the clearing, their little bodies jerking through the air in reverse, chirping sounds that seemed to come before their beaks opened. My coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on a rock. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. The sound of the RV door opening made me jump. Marissa stepped out, wrapped in an oversized flannel shirt, her dark hair tangled from sleep. She looked at the broken mug, then at me. "You okay?" she asked. I opened my mouth to tell her what I'd seen, but the words wouldn't come. How do you explain something like that? How do you say, "Honey, the birds are flying backward," without sounding insane? "Yeah," I said, "just clumsy." She gave me a long look, the kind that said she knew I was lying but didn't have the energy to push. That was us lately. 2 people standing next to each other, alone. "Where's Derek?" she asked. "Went for a walk. Should be back soon." She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself against the morning chill. "This place is creepy." "What do you mean?" "I don't know. It's too quiet. Like everything's holding its breath." She was right. I'd noticed it yesterday when we'd first arrived. The forest was silent in a way that felt unnatural. No bird song, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, no buzz of insects. Just the drip of water and the whisper of wind through the trees. I'd assumed it was normal for this time of year, early October, when things were settling down for winter. But now, with the backward birds, it felt like something else, like the forest was waiting. Derek came back 20 minutes later, his face pale, his camera hanging forgotten around his neck. "You guys need to see this," he said. We followed him into the woods, walking single file along a faint game trail that wound between the massive tree trunks. The ground was spongy with moss and fallen needles, and our footsteps made almost no sound. The silence pressed against my ears, thick and heavy. After about 15 minutes, Derek stopped and pointed. "There," he said. It took me a moment to see it. A deer, standing perfectly still about 30 yards away, partially hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss. It was watching us, its head turned at an unnatural angle, neck twisted too far. "It's been like that for 10 minutes, Derek said quietly. "I found it on my way back. It hasn't moved, hasn't even blinked." I stared at the deer. Its eyes were glassy, reflecting the filtered morning light, but there was something wrong with them. They were too wide, too fixed, like glass eyes in a taxidermied head. "Maybe it's sick," Marissa whispered. "Chronic wasting disease or something." "CWD doesn't make them freeze like statues," Derek said. "It makes them waste away, stumble around." We stood there for another minute, watching the deer watch us. Then, without warning, it began to walk. But it was walking backward, legs moving in reverse, body gliding smoothly through the undergrowth as if someone had hit rewind on a video. It backed away between the trees, neck still twisted, eyes still locked on us until it disappeared into the shadows. "What the fuck?" Marissa breathed. "It's not just the deer," I said, my voice rough. "The birds, too. They're flying backward." Derek turned to look at me, his eyes wide. "You saw it too?" I nodded. "What the hell is happening here?" Marissa asked. None of us had an answer. We walked back to the RV in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts, our own attempts to rationalize what we'd seen. By the time we got back, the sun had climbed higher, burning away some of the morning mist, and the forest seemed almost normal again. Almost. "Maybe it's some kind of magnetic anomaly," Derek suggested as we sat around the fold-out table inside the RV, nursing cups of instant coffee. "Like, I read once about places where magnetic fields mess with animals' navigation systems." "That would make them confused," I said. "Not move backward." "Maybe it's a government thing," he pressed. "Some kind of experiment. We're pretty remote out here. Maybe they're testing something." Marissa laughed, but it was a brittle sound. "You sound like a conspiracy theorist. You got a better explanation," Derek shot back. She didn't. We spent the rest of the day trying to pretend everything was normal. We ate sandwiches for lunch, played cards, avoided talking about what we'd seen. But the tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to choke on. And the silence outside continued, that awful empty quiet broken only by the occasional drip of water. That evening, as the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood, orange, and bruised purple, we heard the first sounds. They came from the forest, distant at first. A rustling, a snapping of branches, then closer. The sounds were rhythmic, purposeful, like footsteps, but wrong somehow. They seemed to be approaching and receding at the same time, as if whatever was making them was walking forward and backward simultaneously. "What is that?" Marissa whispered, her face pressed against the RV's small window. I stood beside her, peering out into the deepening gloom. The trees were dark silhouettes now, their branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. And between them, I could see movement, shapes that were almost human but not quite, their limbs bending at wrong angles, their movements jerky and reversed. "Lock the door," I said quietly. Derek scrambled to check all the locks while I pulled the curtains closed. We sat in the dimly lit interior of the RV, listening to the sounds outside grow louder, closer, footsteps on the gravel around our vehicle, scratching on the metal siding, a low, guttural sound that might have been breathing or might have been laughter. "Should we leave?" Marissa asked, her voice shaking. "And drive through that?" I gestured toward the window. "We can't see anything out there. We could drive off the road, get stuck. At least here we're locked in." "He's right," Derek said, though he looked like he wanted to run just as much as Marissa did. The sounds continued for hours. Sometimes they were right outside our window, so close I could hear the wet sound of something dragging against the RV's exterior. Other times they receded into the distance, only to return minutes later. Through a gap in the curtain, I caught glimpses of movement, figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, there and not there, walking backward through the clearing. None of us slept that night. We sat huddled together on the narrow bench seat, lights off, barely breathing, waiting for dawn. When the sun finally rose, the sounds stopped. The forest fell back into its unnatural silence. I risked opening the curtain and looked outside. The clearing was empty, but there were marks in the gravel. Footprints, dozens of them, circling our RV. They were shaped like human feet, but they pointed in both directions, as if whatever made them had been walking forward and backward at the same time. "We need to leave," Marissa said. She was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest, her eyes red from crying. "Right now. Please." I nodded. Derek nodded. None of us wanted to stay another minute, but when I turned the key in the ignition, the engine wouldn't start. It cranked and cranked but wouldn't turn over. I tried again, and again. Nothing. "No," Derek said. "No, no, no. We checked everything before we left. The RV was fine." "Maybe it's flooded," I said, though I didn't believe it. "We'll wait a few minutes and try again." While we waited, I stepped outside to check under the hood. The morning air was cold and damp, and my breath came out in white puffs. The hood was covered in a fine layer of condensation, and when I touched it, my hand came away sticky. I sniffed my fingers. The smell was organic, musty, like rotting leaves or old meat. I opened the hood and immediately saw the problem. The battery cables had been disconnected. But that wasn't the worst part. The cables themselves were arranged on top of the engine in a pattern, a circle with radiating lines, like a child's drawing of the sun. Or something else, something older. Someone was here. I called back to the RV. Someone disconnected the battery. Derek came out to look. His face went white when he saw the pattern. "That's not a someone," he said. "That's a something." I reconnected the cables with shaking hands, trying not to think about what, or who, had been standing here in the dark, calmly arranging wires while we cowered inside. The engine started this time, roaring to life with a sound that seemed obscenely loud in the quiet forest. "Let's get the fuck out of here," I said. But as I put the RV in gear and began to back up, I saw them. Animals. Dozens of them, emerging from the tree line. Deer, ravens, a fox, even a small black bear. They were all walking backward, moving in reverse, their eyes fixed on us. They formed a loose circle around the clearing, blocking our path. I hit the gas, trying to back out onto the forest road, but the animals moved with us, maintaining their circle, their backward walk perfectly synchronized. And then they stopped. All at once, they just froze, standing perfectly still, staring. "William," Marissa said from behind me. "William, what are they doing?" "I don't know." And then, in perfect unison, the animals began to turn. Not their bodies, their heads. Each one slowly rotated its head 180 degrees, necks twisting impossibly until they were all facing backward while their bodies still pointed forward. The sound of vertebrae cracking and grinding filled the air. Marissa screamed. I floored the gas pedal, sending the RV lurching backward. We crashed through the circle of animals, but instead of scattering, they simply stood there, letting us pass through them, their backward-facing heads tracking our movement. I spun the wheel, getting us onto the forest road, and then shifted into drive and gunned it. We drove for 20 minutes, bouncing and rattling over the rough gravel road, none of us speaking, barely breathing. The forest flashed past the windows, dark and impenetrable. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see something following us, but there was nothing. Just trees and shadows. Finally, we came to a junction with a paved road. A sign pointed left toward Rengel. I turned left and felt some of the tension drain from my shoulders. We were going to be okay. We were going to make it out. But then Derek said, "Stop." "What? No, we're not stopping." "William, stop the RV. Look." I looked ahead and my blood turned to ice. The road in front of us was covered in birds. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All different species, all standing perfectly still, all facing backward. "Go around them," Marissa said. "Just drive through them." "I can't. If I hit them, we could damage the RV, get stuck out here." "So what do we do?" Before anyone could answer, the birds began to move. They lifted off the ground in a massive flock, wings beating in reverse, rising into the air in a swirling, chaotic mass. But they weren't flying away. They were flying toward us. I threw the RV into reverse and hit the gas. We shot backward down the road, the flock of birds pursuing us, a roiling black cloud that blocked out the sun. They slammed into the windshield, their bodies making wet, thumping sounds against the glass. Cracks spread across the windshield like spider webs. "They're trying to blind us," Derek shouted. I couldn't see anything through the mass of birds. I was driving blind, in reverse, on a narrow forest road with God knows what behind us. The RV hit something, a tree, a boulder, I couldn't tell, and spun sideways. We came to a stop with a violent lurch, and I heard Marissa cry out as she was thrown against the wall. The birds kept coming, covering every window, their bodies pressing against the glass, their wings beating in that impossible reverse motion. The RV was dark now, sealed in a living coffin of feathers and beaks. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The birds lifted away, flying backward into the sky, and disappeared into the forest canopy. We sat in the damaged RV, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The windshield was shattered but still intact, held together by the laminated glass. Through the cracks, I could see we were at an angle in the ditch, the front wheel stuck against a fallen log. "Is everyone okay?" I asked. "My arm," Marissa said. She was cradling her left arm against her chest. "I think I hit it on the counter." Derek checked it carefully. "It might be sprained. We need to get you to a doctor. We need to get out of here," I corrected. "Then we'll worry about doctors." I tried to drive out of the ditch, but the wheel was stuck fast. We'd have to try to free it manually. The three of us got out of the RV and stood in the middle of the forest road, surrounded by towering trees and that oppressive silence. "Okay," I said. "Derek and I will try to move the log. Marissa, you get back in and be ready to hit the gas when I give you the signal." She nodded, her face pale with pain, and climbed back into the driver's seat. Derek and I approached the log. It was massive, at least 2 feet in diameter and covered in moss and mushrooms. We grabbed it and tried to roll it away from the wheel, but it wouldn't budge. It was too heavy, too waterlogged. "This isn't working," Derek panted. "We need something to lever it with." I looked around and spotted a long branch lying a few yards away. I started toward it, but Derek grabbed my arm. "William," he said quietly, "look." I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. There were people standing among the trees. At least they looked like people at first glance, but they were wrong. Their bodies were too tall, too thin, their limbs too long, and they were standing with their backs to us, perfectly still, just like the animals had been. "Who are they?" I whispered. "I don't think they're human." As if responding to his words, the figures began to move. They were walking backward toward us, their bodies gliding smoothly through the undergrowth without disturbing a single leaf or branch. I could see now that their clothes were wrong too. Old-fashioned, like something from 100 years ago, but rotted and stained. And their skin, what I could see of it, was gray and mottled. "Get in the RV," I said. "Now." We ran. Derek reached the door first and yanked it open. I was right behind him. But just as I was about to step inside, I heard Marissa scream. I spun around and saw them. More of those figures, dozens of them now, emerging from the forest in a slow, backward procession. They were surrounding us, forming a circle just like the animals had done. And they were all facing away, showing us only their backs. "Start the engine," I shouted at Marissa. "We'll push." The engine roared to life. Derek and I threw ourselves against the front of the RV, pushing with everything we had. The wheel strained against the log, rubber squealing. The figures were getting closer now, close enough that I could smell them, that same rotting leaf smell I'd detected on the battery cables. With a sudden lurch, the RV rolled forward, free of the log. Derek and I ran alongside it as Marissa accelerated, then jumped in through the open door. I slammed it shut just as the first of the figures reached the spot where we'd been standing. Marissa drove like a woman possessed, the RV rattling and groaning over the rough road, the shattered windshield threatening to give way completely. We passed more of those figures standing among the trees, all facing backward, all perfectly still. There must have been hundreds of them, maybe thousands, spread throughout the forest. "What are they?" Marissa asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I said. "But we need to keep moving." We drove for another hour, following the winding forest road, passing through areas where the trees grew so thick they formed a tunnel overhead, blocking out the sky. The figures appeared and disappeared among the trunks, always watching, always facing away. And the birds continued to fly backward overhead, their flight patterns impossible, defying every law of physics I knew. Finally, we saw something that made my heart leap. A ranger station, a small wooden building with a green Forest Service truck parked outside. I'd never been so happy to see another human being. Marissa pulled into the parking area, and we practically fell out of the RV. The ranger station door was open, and I could see a light on inside. "Hello?" I called, stepping through the doorway. "Is anyone here? We need help." The interior of the station was small and cluttered. Maps on the walls, a desk covered in paperwork, a radio crackling with static. And sitting at the desk, facing away from us, was a man in a ranger uniform. "Thank God," I said. "Sir, we need help. Something's wrong in the forest. We've been seeing things." The ranger stood up and turned around, but he turned wrong. His body rotated first, then his head followed, twisting on his neck like it was on a swivel. When he faced us fully, I saw that his eyes were milky white, his skin gray and slack. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just a sound like wind through hollow trees. Derek grabbed my arm and pulled me backward. We stumbled out of the station and ran for the RV, the ranger following us with that same backward walk, his movements smooth and unhurried. "Go, go, go!" I shouted as we threw ourselves inside. Marissa hit the gas and we tore out of the parking area, leaving the ranger standing in the middle of the road, watching us leave with his dead white eyes. "That was a ranger," Derek said, his voice high and panicked. "That was a real person. Whatever's happening here, it's not just animals. It's people, too." "Maybe he was already dead," Marissa suggested. "Maybe whatever's doing this is animating corpses. Or maybe it's changing them," I said. "Taking them over. Making them wrong." We drove in silence after that, each of us lost in our own horror. The road climbed higher into the mountains, winding through areas where patches of snow still clung to the shadows. The afternoon light was failing, and I knew we'd be driving in darkness soon. The thought terrified me. That's when the RV started making a horrible grinding sound. "What now?" Marissa said, her voice cracking. "Pull over," I told her. "Something's wrong with the engine." She brought us to a stop on a wide shoulder overlooking a deep valley. I popped the hood and climbed out to investigate. Derek came with me, both of us nervous about leaving the RV, even for a moment. The engine was overheating, steam rising from the radiator. And when I looked closer, I saw why. There was a hole in the radiator hose, coolant leaking out onto the engine block. "Can you fix it?" Derek asked. "Maybe temporarily, if I had some tape or something to patch it. There's duct tape in the storage compartment." While Derek went to get the tape, I stood by the engine, watching the forest around us. The sun was touching the mountains now, painting everything in shades of red and gold, beautiful and terrible at the same time. That's when I heard it, a sound like children laughing coming from the trees below the road. I walked to the edge of the shoulder and looked down into the valley. There, moving through the undergrowth, was a group of small figures, children, or things that looked like children, all walking backward in a line, their laughter echoing up the mountainside. "Derek," I called, "we need to hurry." He came running with the tape, and together we wrapped it around the radiator hose, covering the hole as best we could. It wouldn't hold for long, but it might get us far enough to reach civilization. "We should go," Derek said, looking nervously at the trees. "Those things you heard, they're getting closer." He was right. The laughter was louder now, and I could see the small figures beginning to climb the slope toward the road. They moved with that same eerie backward motion, their heads twisted around to see where they were going. We scrambled back into the RV. Marissa started the engine, and we took off again, the temporary repair holding for now. But I knew we were running out of time. The RV was falling apart, we were running low on gas, and night was coming. "There," Marissa said suddenly, pointing ahead. "A town." "Thank God, there's a town." I looked where she was pointing and saw lights in the distance, the glow of civilization cutting through the gathering darkness. It was small, just a few buildings clustered along the road, but it was something. It was hope. We drove faster, the RV rattling and shaking, coolant still leaking but holding enough to keep us moving. The town grew larger as we approached. I could make out a general store, a gas station, a handful of houses. But as we got closer, I began to notice something wrong. The town was too quiet. No cars moving, no people visible. And all the buildings' doors were open, hanging on their hinges, as if everyone had left in a hurry. "Marissa, slow down," I said. "What?" "No, we need to get help. Look at it, the town's empty." She slowed the RV as we entered the main street. It was like driving through a ghost town. Windows were dark, streetlights were off, and trash littered the streets. We passed the gas station, its pumps standing like lonely sentinels, and I saw that the store had been ransacked, items scattered across the floor visible through the open door. "Where is everyone?" Derek whispered. "Maybe they evacuated," Marissa said, but she didn't sound convinced. We drove slowly through the town, looking for any sign of life. That's when we saw them. Standing in the yards, in the doorways, on the porches. People. Dozens of them. All facing backward. "Oh, God," Marissa breathed. "It's the whole town." The figures didn't move as we passed, didn't react to our presence. They just stood there, backs to us, perfectly still. I recognized some of the clothes they wore. Tourist gear, fishing vests, hiking boots. These had been normal people, visitors and locals before whatever had happened to them. "Keep driving," I said. "Don't stop." We made it through the town and back out onto the open road. The forest rose up around us again, dark and oppressive. And now, in the deepening twilight, I could see them everywhere. Those backward-walking figures, moving through the trees, an army of wrong things spreading through the forest like a disease. "How far does this go?" Derek asked, his voice barely audible. "Is it just this forest, this region, or is it spreading?" "I don't know," I said, "but we have to keep moving. We have to get out of Alaska." "And go where?" Marissa asked. "What if it's everywhere? What if there's nowhere to run?" I didn't have an answer for that. We drove through the night, the RV's headlights cutting weak beams through the darkness. The radiator kept overheating, forcing us to stop every hour to let it cool down. Each stop was terrifying. We'd sit in the dark, listening to the sounds outside, the footsteps circling us, the backward-flying birds hitting the roof like hail. Sometime around midnight, Derek fell asleep from exhaustion. Marissa and I stayed awake, taking turns driving, neither of us willing to close our eyes. We talked in quiet voices, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. "Maybe it's something in the air," Marissa suggested. "Some kind of spore or chemical that affects the brain." "That doesn't explain the backward movement," I said. "Animals and people can't just decide to walk backward perfectly in sync. It violates basic biology. Then what's your theory?" I didn't want to say it out loud, didn't want to give voice to the thought that had been growing in my mind all day, but finally, I did. "I think something's wrong with time here," I said, "or space, or reality itself. I think something broke, and this forest is bleeding through from somewhere else. Some place where things run backward, where cause follows effect instead of the other way around." Marissa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That's insane." "I know, but I believe you." We reached the junction with the main highway as dawn was breaking. The sight of that paved road with its painted lines and mile markers made me want to cry with relief. We were going to make it. We were going to escape. But as Marissa turned onto the highway heading south toward Ketchikan and the ferry terminal, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing along the sides of the highway, spaced evenly every 100 feet or so, were people, all facing backward, all perfectly still. They lined the road as far as I could see in both directions, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. "Don't stop," I said. "No matter what, don't stop." Marissa drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. We passed the backward people and they didn't move, didn't react, but I could feel their attention on us, the same unblinking focus the deer had given us in the forest. We drove for hours, the sun climbing higher, the landscape gradually changing from thick forest to more open terrain. And still the figures lined the road, silent witnesses to our escape. Derek woke up around noon, groggy and confused. When he saw the figures, he didn't say anything, just stared out the window with wide, haunted eyes. That evening, we reached Ketchikan. The town was still normal, people walking forward, birds flying the right direction, everything as it should be. We pulled into a hospital parking lot, and Marissa finally broke down, sobbing with relief as paramedics checked her arm. The doctors said she had a hairline fracture. They put her in a cast and gave her painkillers. Nobody asked us about the damaged RV or why we looked like we'd been through hell. Maybe they didn't want to know. We caught the ferry to Seattle the next morning, abandoning the RV. I didn't care about the deposit. I never wanted to see it again. On the ferry, standing at the rail and watching Alaska recede into the distance, Derek finally spoke about what had happened. "We should tell someone," he said. "Warn people. There's something wrong in that forest." "Who would believe us?" I asked. "We don't have any proof. No photos, no video. Just a crazy story about backward birds and zombie rangers. But those people, the town, the ones on the highway, someone must have noticed they're missing. Maybe. Or maybe they're all in the same boat as us. Escaped, traumatized, with no way to prove what they saw." Derek was quiet after that. We all were. There was nothing left to say. Back in Seattle, we went our separate ways. Derek moved back in with his parents in Portland. Marissa and I tried to continue our relationship, but it fell apart within a month. How could it not? Every time we looked at each other, we saw the forest. We heard the laughter. We felt the presence of those things watching us with their backward faces. I moved to Arizona, as far from forests and Alaska as I could get. I got a job at a warehouse, a mindless job that doesn't require thinking. I live alone in a small apartment. I don't date, I don't make friends. I'm just existing, but I still see them sometimes. Not in reality. I'm not crazy, not yet, but in my dreams. The backward people, the reversed birds, the children climbing up from the valley. And sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear that sound, the laughter, the footsteps, the hollow wind through dead trees. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from Derek. He was crying, barely coherent. "William," he said, "the birds. I saw them again, outside my parents' house, flying backward." "You're just stressed," I told him. "It's trauma, PTSD. It's not real." "I'm looking at them right now," he said. "They're in the yard. William, I think it's spreading." I hung up. I couldn't deal with it. Wouldn't deal with it. Yesterday, I saw the news. A small story, barely worth mentioning. 16 people in a town outside Olympia, Washington, all found standing in their yards, facing backward, unresponsive to stimuli. Doctors are baffled. Psychiatric evaluation pending. I recognize the name of the town. It's 20 miles from Portland, 20 miles from Derek's parents' house. I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's anything I can do. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe it is spreading, whatever it is, bleeding out from that forest like a wound in reality. I think about going back, finding answers, stopping it somehow, but I know I won't. I'm too much of a coward. I'll just stay here in my apartment, in my desert city where birds fly forward and people walk right, and I'll pretend that everything's normal. But I can't stop thinking about something Marissa said that last night in the RV. We were talking about theories, trying to make sense of the impossible, and she asked me a question I couldn't answer. "William," she said, "if things move backward there, does that mean they're going back to the beginning or forward to the end?" I didn't know then. I still don't know, but I'm starting to suspect the answer is worse than either option. Last night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror brushing my teeth before bed. And just for a moment, just a split second, I could have sworn I saw my reflection blink before I did. I'm trying to tell myself it was nothing, just fatigue, just trauma playing tricks. But this morning, when I poured my coffee, the liquid spiraled the wrong way in the cup, and outside my window I can hear birds singing. I haven't looked yet to see which direction they're flying. I don't think I want to know. Story 3. My name is Marcus. I'm 34. The fire at Devil's Den State Park, Arkansas hissed like it was speaking a word. I'd driven 12 hours straight from Dallas, my RV rattling over every pothole on Highway 71, just to get away from the divorce papers sitting on my kitchen counter. Devil's Den seemed like the right kind of place for a man trying to disappear for a while. Remote, heavily wooded, and according to the park brochure, home to some of the oldest sandstone formations in the Ozarks. The woman at the ranger station had given me a tired smile when I checked in, her eyes lingering on my wedding ring before I realized I was still wearing it. "You picked a quiet time," she'd said, sliding my permit across the counter. "Most folks clear out after Labor Day. You'll have the place pretty much to yourself." That's exactly what I wanted. I set up camp at Site 47, tucked deep in the woods near Butterfield Nature Trail, far from the main camping areas. The RV's generator hummed to life without complaint, and I spent the first hour just sitting in my folding chair, drinking warm beer and watching the light filter through the oak and hickory trees. The forest was dense here, the kind of dense that swallows sound and makes you forget there's a world beyond the tree line. By the time I got the campfire going, dusk had settled over the park like a thick blanket. I'd brought along my grandfather's camping cookbook, one of the few things I'd insisted on keeping when Rachel and I divided up our lives. The pages were brittle and smoke-stained, filled with his cramped handwriting. I was flipping through it, looking for his chili recipe when the fire made that sound. It wasn't a pop or a crackle, it was a hiss, long and deliberate, almost like someone had exhaled a single syllable. I looked up from the cookbook, watching the flames dance in the growing darkness. Orange and yellow, normal campfire colors. I told myself I was hearing things that 12 hours of driving had left my nerves raw. Then the fire hissed again. This time, I heard it clearly. Sun. My hand tightened around the beer bottle. The forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no distant birds settling for the night, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just that heavy, pressing silence that makes your ears ring. The flames flickered, and for just a moment, less than a second, they burned blue. I stood up so fast my chair tipped backward. The fire was orange again, crackling normally, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. I circled the fire pit, looking for anything that might explain it. A pocket of gas in the wood? Some chemical residue on the logs? But I'd gathered the wood myself from the forest floor, dead branches that had passed the snap test. "You're losing it," I muttered to myself. 2 days out of your marriage and you're already losing it. I forced myself to sit back down, to eat the can of beans I heated over the fire, to act like everything was normal. But I kept watching those flames, and twice more before I retreated to the RV, I could have sworn they flickered blue. Inside the RV, I locked the door, something I never did while camping, and tried to settle in for the night. The generator provided enough power to run the lights and charge my phone, though I'd promised myself I wouldn't look at it. No checking Rachel's social media, no reading through old text messages, no torturing myself with what-ifs. I made it until 10:30 before I caved and pulled up her Instagram. She'd posted a picture 3 hours ago. Her and her sister at some wine bar in Uptown, both of them laughing. The caption read, "New Beginnings," with a champagne emoji. I turned the phone off and shoved it in the drawer beside my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts. The RV's thin walls did little to muffle the sounds of the forest, and Devil's Den was full of sounds. Branches scraping against branches, the distant hoot of an owl, something larger moving through the brush, snapping twigs as it went. And underneath it all, so faint I might have imagined it, a hissing sound. I woke at dawn to find my campfire still burning. That was impossible. I'd doused it thoroughly before going to bed, dumping 2 full bottles of water over the logs and stirring the ashes with a stick until I was certain every ember was dead. But now, in the pale morning light, the fire pit held a small, steady flame, burning without smoke. I walked toward it slowly, my bare feet cold on the damp ground. The flame was about 6 inches high, perfectly still despite the morning breeze. And it was blue. Not the flickering blue I'd seen last night, but a solid, unwavering cobalt blue, like the flame from a gas stove. I reached out to feel for heat and jerked my hand back. The fire was ice cold. What the hell? I grabbed a stick and poked at the burning logs. They were completely cold to the touch, the wood unburned and damp from the water I'd poured over them last night. The blue flame danced above them, sourceless and impossible. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. I backed away from the fire pit, my eyes locked on that unnatural flame, and nearly tripped over something behind me. It was my folding chair, set up exactly where I'd left it last night. Except now there was something sitting in it. My grandfather's cookbook lay open in the seat, and the pages were covered in ash. Someone had traced words in the ash, careful letters that stood out gray against the yellowed paper. Witness the word spoken in fire. My hands were shaking as I picked up the cookbook. The ash smudged under my fingers, but the words remained legible. I looked around the campsite, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. The nearest camper was probably a quarter-mile away, and the ranger station even farther. Dense forest pressed in on all sides, the morning mist making it impossible to see more than 30 feet in any direction. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The forest gave me nothing back. No echo, no response, just that same oppressive silence. I should have left right then. Should have packed up the RV and driven straight back to Dallas, divorce papers and empty house be damned. But I'd spent too many years ignoring my instincts, pushing down my gut feelings in favor of logic and reason. Rachel used to say I overthought everything, that I couldn't just feel without analyzing. So instead of leaving, I analyzed. The blue flame had to be some kind of natural phenomenon, swamp gas maybe, or phosphorescence from decaying wood. The message in the ash was probably just my imagination, my exhausted brain making patterns out of random smudges, and the fire hadn't actually been burning all night. I'd just been too tired to put it out properly, and somehow it had reignited in a weird way. I almost convinced myself. I spent the morning hiking Butterfield Trail trying to clear my head. The path wound through the forest in a lazy loop, marked with white blazes on the trees. Devil's Den earned its name from the jumbled sandstone formations scattered throughout the park. Massive boulders and rock outcroppings that looked like they'd been dropped by giants, creating caves and crevices and shadowed hollows where the sun never reached. The trail was empty, except for me. I passed through groves of oak and hickory, their leaves just starting to turn yellow at the edges. The morning mist had burned off, but the air still felt heavy, oppressive in a way I couldn't quite name. Every time I stopped to catch my breath or consult my trail map, I had the distinct feeling of being watched. I told myself it was just the normal paranoia of being alone in the woods. Everyone feels it. That prickle on the back of your neck, that sense of eyes in the shadows. It's evolutionary, a holdover from when humans were prey as often as predators. But this felt different, more intentional. I was about a mile into the trail when I found the first handprint. It was pressed into the soft dirt beside the path, rendered in what looked like ash. The print was too large to be human, easily twice the size of my hand, with elongated fingers that ended in sharp points. But the most disturbing part was how fresh it looked. The edges were still crisp, the ash still dark and moist. I crouched down for a closer look, careful not to touch it. The print had been made recently, within the last hour, judging by how undisturbed it was, but I hadn't seen anyone else on the trail, hadn't heard anyone. A twig snapped in the forest behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering. The forest looked empty, just endless trees and dappled shadows. But I could have sworn I saw something move, a flicker of motion about 50 yards off the trail, too fast and fluid to be human. "Hello?" I called again, hating how my voice shook. No response. Just the soft whisper of wind through leaves. I kept hiking, but now I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every snap of a branch, every rustle in the underbrush made me flinch. I found 3 more ash handprints along the trail, each one slightly larger than the last, each one positioned as if something had been crawling alongside the path, keeping pace with me. By the time I made it back to camp, my shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool air. The blue flame in my fire pit had gone out, leaving behind nothing but cold, unburned logs. I checked the RV, still locked, everything inside exactly as I'd left it, and tried to convince myself to eat lunch. I managed half a sandwich before the smell hit me. It rolled through the campsite like a wave, thick and cloying and unmistakably rotten. Not the clean smell of decay from a dead animal, but something chemical and wrong, like burning plastic mixed with spoiled meat. I covered my nose and mouth, gagging, and stumbled away from the picnic table. The smell seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I circled the RV, looking for a source, a dead animal under the vehicle maybe, or something in the trash, but found nothing. The stench grew stronger by the second, making my eyes water. Then I saw the fire pit. The logs I'd left cold and dead were burning again, but this time the flames weren't blue. They were black. Jet black flames licked at the logs, producing that horrible smell and no heat whatsoever, and in the heart of the fire, rendered in dancing shadows against the black flames, I saw faces. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All screaming silently, their mouths stretched wide in anguish, their eyes hollow and pleading. The faces shifted and changed, melting into each other, an endless parade of suffering captured in fire and shadow. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The faces seemed to be looking at me, recognizing me, reaching out through the flames with desperate, phantom hands. One face resolved clearer than the others. A man about my age, his features twisted in agony. As I watched, frozen in horror, his mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. Witness, speak, burn. The black flames roared higher, and I finally found the strength to move. I ran to the RV, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice before managing to get the door open. I slammed it behind me and threw the deadbolt, pressing my back against the metal door. Outside, I could hear the fire crackling. Not the friendly sound of a normal campfire, but something else. A wet, organic sound, like meat sizzling on a grill. And underneath it, so faint I might have imagined it, the sound of voices whispering in unison. I sat on the floor of the RV for 3 hours, watching the daylight fade through the windows, waiting for the courage to look outside again. By the time I finally forced myself to check, the fire pit was cold and empty. The logs scattered as if they'd never been burning at all. But the smell remained. Faint now, just a whiff on the breeze, but unmistakable. I tried calling the ranger station. My phone had 1 bar of service, flickering in and out, but when I finally got through, the line crackled with static so thick I could barely hear the woman's voice on the other end. Ranger station, this is Denise. This is Marcus Holloway, Site 47. Something's wrong with my campsite. The fire pit, it keeps... The static surged, drowning out my words. Through the white noise, I thought I heard another voice, deeper and harsher. Witness, you're breaking up, sir. Did you say fire? Is there a fire emergency? No, not an emergency, but... Witness the word. The line went dead. When I tried to call back, my phone showed no service at all. I spent that evening locked in the RV, lights on, radio playing quietly just to fill the silence. I'd pulled the curtains across all the windows, telling myself I didn't want to see what might be outside in the dark. The truth was, I was terrified of what might see me. Around 8 o'clock, I heard footsteps outside. They were heavy and deliberate, circling the RV in a slow, steady rhythm. I held my breath, straining to hear over the pounding of my heart. The footsteps passed the driver's side door, then the back of the RV, then the passenger side. A complete circuit. Then they stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then something scraped against the metal wall of the RV, right beside where I was sitting. It sounded like nails. Long, hard nails, dragging across the aluminum siding, slow and deliberate. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The scraping continued, tracing a path along the wall, leaving what I imagined were deep gouges in the metal. When it reached the window above my bed, it stopped. I couldn't help it. I had to look. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, and pulled back the corner of the curtain. A face stared back at me. It was pressed against the glass, features distorted by the pressure. But what I could make out was wrong in every way that mattered. The eyes were too large, reflecting the light from inside the RV with an amber glow like an animal's. The mouth was stretched too wide, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. And the skin, what I could see of it, looked burned, covered in patterns of ash and soot that formed symbols I didn't recognize. The thing's mouth moved. I couldn't hear through the glass, but I could read its lips. Witness. I jerked the curtain closed and backed away from the window, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The scraping sound resumed, moving around the RV again, but faster now, more aggressive. It circled once, twice, 3 times, the sound of those nails against metal setting my teeth on edge. Then it stopped. I waited in the silence, every muscle tensed, ready for… what? For it to break through the door? For the walls to tear open? For reality itself to fold in on me like paper? Instead, I heard my own voice outside. "Marcus," it called, perfectly mimicking my inflection, my Texas drawl. "Marcus, please, I need help." I clamped my hands over my ears, but I could still hear it. "The fire," my voice continued. "I need to tell you about the fire. Please, Marcus, it's important. You have to witness." "You're not real," I whispered. "You're not real." "I am you," my voice said, and now it sounded closer, right outside the door. "I'm the part that understands, the part that sees. Let me in, Marcus. Let me show you what the flames want to say." Something rattled the door handle. Once, twice, testing the lock. I grabbed the bat I kept under the driver's seat. Rachel had insisted I bring it, one of our last conversations that hadn't ended in shouting, and held it with white-knuckled hands. If that thing got inside, I'd… The rattling stopped. "You can't hide from witness," my voice said, and now it sounded amused, playful even. "The fire speaks whether you listen or not, and it's been speaking about you for such a long time, Marcus. Since before you were born, since before your grandfather. The flames remember everything." "Go away," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. My voice, the thing outside wearing my voice, laughed. It sounded exactly like me. The same laugh I'd heard in home videos, the same laugh Rachel had once said made her fall in love with me. "I'll be here," it said, "waiting. The flames never sleep." The footsteps resumed, moving away from the RV now, growing fainter. I stood there for another hour, bat raised, waiting for them to come back. They didn't. Eventually, exhaustion won over terror. I collapsed onto the bed without undressing. The bat still clutched in my hands, and fell into a restless sleep filled with dreams of burning faces and words written in ash. I woke to daylight and the smell of coffee. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed everything. The terror, the impossible fire, the thing outside, all just stress and exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. Then I sat up and saw the windows. Every window in the RV, inside and out, was covered in ash handprints. Dozens of them, overlapping and smeared, like a crowd of burning things had pressed against the glass all night, trying to get in or trying to get my attention. Through the handprints, I could see symbols drawn in the ash, the same symbols I'd glimpsed on the burned face from last night. And on the table beside my bed, my grandfather's cookbook lay open again. More words traced in ash. The witness must speak the word or become the word. Below that, in smaller letters, your grandfather understood. He spoke. Now you. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the book. I flipped through the pages, looking for… what? Some explanation? Some clue that my grandfather had experienced this too? And I found it. Tucked between the recipe for campfire stew and instructions for Dutch oven bread, written in my grandfather's handwriting but never mentioned to me, never passed down as part of the family lore. If you see the blue flames at Devil's Den, do not try to understand. Do not try to investigate. Pack up immediately and leave. Tell no one what you saw. The fire speaks in words that burn the tongue and scorch the mind. I spoke one word, just one, and it cost me everything. My Sarah, my peace, my sleep. The flames show you faces of those who tried to witness and failed. Do not add your face to their number. Go. Run. Forget. The note was dated September 1967, 3 years before I was born. I'd never heard this story, never knew my grandfather had been to Devil's Den. He'd died when I was 15, his last years marked by increasing paranoia and insomnia. My grandmother, Sarah, had died young when my father was just a boy. Heart attack, the family said. Sudden and unexpected. I looked at the windows again, at those desperate handprints, and understood with horrible clarity. My grandmother was one of the faces in the flames. I had to get out. I threw my belongings into bags without organizing them, not caring about neatness or efficiency, just desperate to leave. The generator sputtered when I tried to start it. It had been running fine yesterday, but eventually caught. I cranked the RV's engine, heard it turn over once, twice, and die. I tried again. The engine made a grinding sound, then nothing. No, 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 I chanted, pumping the gas pedal. Come on, come on. The engine was completely dead. I checked the battery, fully charged. Checked the fuel gauge, 3/4 full. Everything should have worked, but it didn't. I grabbed my phone. No service, not even one flickering bar. Through the windshield I could see my campfire pit. The logs had arranged themselves into a pattern overnight, forming what looked almost like letters, and as I watched, smoke began to rise from them. Blue-gray smoke that spelled out words in the morning air. Speak. The smoke shifted, formed new words, or burn. I stumbled out of the RV, the bat still in my hands, though I knew it would be useless against whatever this was. The forest around me looked different in the morning light, darker somehow, the shadows too deep, the trees leaning at angles that didn't seem quite right. What do you want? I screamed at the smoke, at the forest, at the fire pit. What do you want me to say? The smoke swirled, and I heard it. Not with my ears, but somewhere deeper, in the base of my skull where fear lives. The word that burns. I don't know what that means. My voice cracked. I don't understand. The smoke began to take shape. It formed into a figure, tall and thin with elongated limbs and a head that wasn't quite human. The thing from last night, but clearer now in daylight, rendered in blue-gray smoke that somehow held its shape despite the breeze. It pointed at the fire pit with one long, smoking finger. I understood then, with a certainty that turned my blood to ice. It wanted me to light the fire, to witness the flames again, to see the faces and hear the word they were screaming, the word my grandfather had spoken, the word that had cost him everything. No, I said, backing away. I won't. The smoke figure moved closer. I could see through it, see the trees behind its translucent form, but it was solid enough to block my path, solid enough to reach out with those elongated fingers. I said no. I swung the bat. It passed through the smoke figure without resistance, but the motion disrupted its form. For a moment, the figure scattered into wisps and streamers. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the campsite, away from the RV, away from the impossible fire and the burning word that wanted to be spoken. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face, roots trying to trip me. Behind me, I heard footsteps, heavy and numerous like a crowd running in perfect sync. And voices, my voice, repeated 100 times over, chanting something I couldn't quite make out. I burst onto Butterfield Trail and turned left, heading toward what I hoped was the main park road. If I could just reach the ranger station, if I could find someone else, another human being who could confirm I wasn't losing my mind, the trail ahead of me was gone. Where there should have been a clear path marked with white blazes, there was only forest. Dense, impassable forest with trees growing so close together I couldn't squeeze between them. I spun around looking for the trail behind me, but it was gone too. The forest had closed in around me, trapping me in a small clearing maybe 20 feet across. The footsteps grew louder. They emerged from the trees in a circle around me, figures made of smoke and shadow, each one wearing my face but burned and twisted, mouths open in silent screams. 20 of them, 30, more appearing every second, closing in, their hands reaching. In the center of the clearing, the ground split open. Fire erupted from the crack, blue flames that burned without heat, but I could feel them anyway, could feel them licking at my mind, trying to get inside, trying to burn away everything that made me me and replace it with a word. I could almost hear it, almost understand it. It was there in the hiss of the flames, in the whisper of the smoke figures, in the very air I breathed. A word that predated language, that existed before humans learned to speak, a word that fire itself had spoken when the world was young and unnamed, the word that creates by destroying, the word that illuminates by burning, the word that transforms everything it touches into ash and memory. My grandfather had spoken it, had tried to contain it, to write it down, to warn me. But you can't warn someone about something that exists beyond warning. You can only witness it, speak it, or become it. The smoke figures were touching me now. Their fingers were cold as ice but burned like fire, paradoxical and impossible. They pressed against my face, my chest, my hands. Their mouths moved in unison, forming the shape of the word over and over, trying to teach me, trying to make me understand. I felt my own mouth opening, felt my tongue moving to form sounds I didn't recognize. The word was climbing up my throat, burning as it came, demanding to be spoken. No, I bit down hard on my tongue, tasting blood. The pain shocked me back into myself, back into my body, back into the present moment. The word retreated, snarling in frustration inside my mind. I dropped to my knees and dug into the dirt with my bare hands. If I couldn't speak, if I couldn't run, then I would do what my grandfather couldn't. I would become the silence. I would refuse to witness, refuse to speak, refuse to participate in whatever ancient horror had taken root in this forest. The smoke figures shrieked. It was the sound of air escaping from a punctured tire, the sound of steam escaping from a kettle, the sound of every breath I'd ever taken forced back down my throat. They clawed at me, trying to pry open my mouth, trying to force the word out. But I kept digging, kept pressing my face into the cool dirt, filling my mouth with earth, drowning the word in soil and stone and the dead remains of 1,000 forgotten trees. The blue flames roared higher, and I felt rather than saw the faces in the fire multiplying. 100, 1,000, all the people who'd tried to witness and failed, all the people who'd spoken the word and been consumed by it. My grandmother's face appeared, young and terrified, her mouth forming a warning I couldn't hear. Then my grandfather's face, ancient and resigned, speaking the word one last time. Then my own face, 50 years older, burned and hollow, speaking the word to someone who looked like me, who might be my son or grandson or some future version of myself, passing on the curse like a terrible inheritance. No, no, no. I pressed deeper into the earth, digging a grave for myself or for the word, I didn't know which. The soil was cold and wet and smelled like clay and decay. I could feel things moving in it, beetles and worms and things without names, all of them whispering the word, all of them trying to teach it to me. But I refused. I kept refusing. I would refuse until the world ended or I died or the fire consumed everything. I would not speak. I would not witness. I would not. The smoke figures pulled back. The flames guttered. The forest held its breath. And in that moment of terrible silence, I understood. They couldn't make me speak. The word had to be given freely, willingly. It had to be spoken by choice or not at all. That was the rule, the one unbreakable rule of whatever ancient power had claimed Devil's Den as its own. My grandfather had chosen to speak it, had seen the faces in the flames and decided to bear witness, to add his voice to the chorus. Maybe he thought it would save someone. Maybe he thought it would stop the fire. Maybe he just couldn't resist, but I could. I got to my feet, dirt falling from my hands and face, blood running down my chin from my bitten tongue. The smoke figures watched me with my own borrowed eyes, waiting. "No," I said, the word thick and muddy in my mouth. "I don't care what happens. I don't care if you keep me here forever. I will not speak your word. I will not witness your fire. I will not." The world folded. That's the only way I can describe it. Reality itself seemed to fold like paper, and I was suddenly somewhere else, when else. The forest was gone. I was standing in a vast darkness, lit only by flames. Blue and black and colors I don't have names for, flames that burned in shapes that hurt to look at. And in the center of the flames, something waited. It was too large to comprehend, too ancient to understand. Not evil, exactly. Evil implied intention, morality, choice. This thing was beyond all that. It simply was, had always been, would always be. It was the fire at the heart of the world, the burning that predated life and would outlast death. It showed me things, visions that seared themselves into my brain like brands. I saw the first human who'd spoken the word, a Paleo-Indian hunter 10,000 years ago, standing in a cave and speaking to fire because that was all he knew to speak to. I saw the word pass from tongue to tongue, from generation to generation, carried by shamans and prophets and madmen. I saw it arrive at Devil's Den, brought by Spanish explorers who'd learned it from the Caddo, who'd learned it from someone else, tracing back and back to that first burning syllable. I saw my grandfather as a young man, newly married, camping with my grandmother. I saw him wake to blue flames and choose to speak because he thought it would protect her. I saw the word burn through him, consuming his peace, his sleep, his dreams. I saw my grandmother die 6 months later, her heart stopping for no reason doctors could find because the word had marked her through him. And I saw myself, saw futures branching like flames, all the ways this could end. In most of them, I spoke the word. In most of them, I witnessed. In most of them, I became another face in the fire, another voice in the chorus, another link in a chain stretching back to the dawn of language itself. But in a few, just a few, I refused. I turned away. I chose silence. The flames showed me what that choice would cost. I would carry the memory of this place forever. I would never sleep easily again. I would flinch at campfires and startle at the sound of hissing wood. A piece of me would always be here, in this burning darkness, refusing to speak. But I would be free. The thing in the flames, the word itself, the burning sentence that had been trying to speak itself through me, retreated, not in defeat, exactly, more like acknowledgement. I'd played the game and refused to lose. That was rare enough to be worth respecting. Reality unfolded. I was back in the clearing, surrounded by smoke figures that were already dissipating in the morning breeze. The blue flames in the ground sputtered and died. The forest around me loosened, the trees shifting back to their normal positions, the trail reappearing beneath my feet. I could hear birds singing. Real birds, normal birds, not the oppressive silence of before. I ran. I ran back to my campsite where the RV sat exactly as I'd left it. The engine started on the first try, turning over with a healthy rumble that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I didn't bother packing, didn't bother cleaning up, just threw the RV in gear and drove. The ranger at the gate looked surprised to see me. Leaving already. You still have 3 days on your permit. Family emergency, I lied. She nodded sympathetically. Safe travels. Come back anytime. I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the forest in my rearview mirror, making sure nothing was following me, making sure the trees stayed trees and the smoke stayed smoke. I drove for 6 hours straight, not stopping until I was well into Texas and the Ozarks were nothing but a memory. Only then did I pull over at a truck stop, my hands still shaking, my tongue still aching from where I'd bitten it. I haven't been camping since, haven't lit a campfire. Haven't opened my grandfather's cookbook, which I left behind at Devil's Den, pressed open to that warning he'd written. Rachel called a week after I got back, asking if I'd signed the papers yet. I told her I would. I told her I was sorry. I told her I loved her and probably always would. She cried, and so did I, and we agreed to try counseling, to give it one more chance. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if I can explain why I wake up screaming 3 nights a week, why I can't stand the smell of smoke, why I sometimes catch myself starting to say a word I don't remember learning. But I know this, I didn't speak it. I didn't witness. I didn't become another face in the flames. I chose silence. And every day I have to choose it again. Have to swallow the word back down when it tries to climb up my throat. Have to look away from fires, from candles, from anything that burns with a voice I'm not supposed to understand. It's been 8 months now. 8 months of fighting, of refusing, of bearing the weight of what I saw without giving it voice. Sometimes I wonder if my grandfather felt this way. If every day for him was a battle not to speak, not to teach the word to his son, not to pass on the curse. If dying was a relief, a final silence he'd earned. I wonder if I'll make it as long as he did, but mostly I just try not to think about Devil's Den. Try not to remember the blue flames or the burning faces or the word that wants so desperately to be spoken. I try not to think about how my campfire hissed like it was speaking. I try not to think about the faces I saw in the flames, screaming silently, waiting for someone to witness them. I try not to think about how one of those faces looked exactly like Rachel. I try. I fail. And the word grows louder every day. Story 4. I'm Chloe, 29. The fog at Dolly Sod's Wilderness, West Virginia, had fingerprints. I noticed them first on the morning of our second day, pressed into the condensation on the RV's windshield, whirls and ridges so distinct they looked deliberate, as if someone had stood outside in the pre-dawn darkness and methodically touched every window. My boyfriend Marcus was still asleep in the back, snoring softly beneath the quilt his grandmother had made, and I stood there in my thermal underwear, coffee mug cooling in my hands, staring at those prints. 5 fingers on the driver's side, 4 on the passenger side, 3 on the small window above the sink. "Baby, you're letting the cold in," Marcus mumbled, shuffling out in his boxer shorts, hair sticking up in 17 directions. He was 31, a software engineer who'd been promising me this trip for 2 years, ever since his company went fully remote. The RV was a rental, a 25-foot Class C that smelled faintly of old cigarettes and pine-scented air freshener. But it was ours for 10 days, and Dolly Sod's had been my choice. I'd read about the sweeping vistas, the rocky plains that resembled tundra, the carnivorous plants in the bogs. What the travel blogs hadn't mentioned was the fog. It had rolled in sometime after midnight, thick as wool, muffling everything. When I'd gotten up to pee around 3 a.m., I'd looked out to find our campsite completely obscured, the fire pit we'd used for s'mores now just a darker gray smudge in the surrounding grayness. I'd felt watched then, too, but I'd chalked it up to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness, the creaks of trees I couldn't name. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the handprints. Marcus squinted at them, then shrugged. "Condensation does weird things. Plus, we probably touched the windows yesterday when we were setting up." "From the outside?" "Maybe when we were checking the hookups." He kissed my temple and reached for the coffee pot. "You worry too much, Chloe. That's why we're here, remember? To decompress." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. The last 6 months had been hell. My mother's cancer diagnosis, the subsequent treatment, the remission that felt more like a stay of execution than a cure. I'd been the one driving her to appointments, holding her hair back when the chemo made her sick, sleeping on a cot in her hospital room. Marcus had been patient, supportive, but I could see the strain in his eyes, the way he'd started working later hours, staying up after I went to bed to play video games with his headphones on. This trip was supposed to be our reset button. The fog didn't lift all morning. We ate breakfast, instant oatmeal and 2 ripe bananas, and I tried to shake the feeling that had settled into my chest like a stone. Marcus suggested we hike one of the shorter trails, the Blackbird Knob Trail, just a couple of miles out and back. I agreed, grateful for the excuse to move, to do something other than stare at those handprints which I'd wiped away but which seemed to have left faint, oily residue behind. We set out around 10, following the trail markers into the dense spruce forest. The fog clung to everything, beating on our jackets, turning Marcus's beard into a net of tiny diamonds. The silence was oppressive, broken only by our footsteps and the occasional drip of moisture from the branches overhead. No birds sang, no squirrels chattered. Even the wind seemed to have abandoned this place. "It's like we're the only people on Earth," Marcus said, trying for levity but achieving something closer to unease. "I read that Dolly Sod's was used as a military training ground during World War II, I offered, my voice sounding too loud in the muffled air. "They did mortar and artillery practice here. There are still unexploded ordnances buried in some areas." Jesus, Chloe, you really know how to set a mood. I'm just saying, the area has history. It's seen violence. Lots of places have seen violence. That doesn't make them haunted. I didn't respond, because something had caught my eye, a shape in the fog ahead, too tall and narrow to be a tree. As we approached, it resolved into a trail marker, the wooden post carved with an arrow pointing deeper into the mist. But beneath the arrow, someone had scratched additional marks, crude symbols that might have been letters or might have been something else entirely. They looked fresh, the exposed wood still pale. "Kids messing around," Marcus said, but he took my hand as we passed it, and I noticed his palm was sweating despite the cold. The trail began to climb, switchbacking up a rocky slope. The fog thinned slightly here, enough that we could see perhaps 20 feet ahead, and the landscape revealed itself in pieces. Granite boulders patched with lichen, twisted trees that seemed to be reaching away from the trail rather than toward the sun, and everywhere, that peculiar reddish soil that gave the place its name, staining everything it touched like dried blood. We reached a small clearing and stopped to catch our breath. Marcus pulled out his phone to take a photo, then frowned at the screen. "No signal, obviously, but the GPS is freaking out. It keeps putting us in different locations, jumping around. First it said we were back at the parking area. Then it said we were 5 miles north. Now it's just spinning." I pulled out my own phone and found the same thing. The blue dot that represented our location stuttering across the map like a dying insect. "Maybe the fog is interfering with the satellites. That's not really how it works, but—" He trailed off, staring at something over my shoulder. "Chloe, don't freak out, but there's someone standing in the trees." I turned slowly, my heart already hammering. At first, I saw nothing but fog and trunks. Then a shape emerged, humanoid but wrong somehow, the proportions subtly off. It was too far away to make out details, but I had the distinct impression it was watching us. "Hello?" Marcus called out. "Hey, are you okay?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move. Just stood there, partially obscured by a spruce tree, silent as the fog itself. "Maybe they're lost," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. Something about the way the figure stood, so perfectly still, reminded me of a predator waiting for prey to move first. Marcus took a step forward. "We have extra water if you need some." The figure tilted its head, a slow mechanical movement that made my skin crawl, and then stepped backward into the fog, dissolving from sight so quickly it might never have been there at all. "What the fuck?" Marcus breathed. We waited, straining to hear footsteps, the crack of branches, anything. The silence pressed down like a physical weight. Finally, Marcus said, "Let's head back. This fog is too thick for a decent hike anyway." I didn't argue. We turned and started retracing our steps, moving faster now, no longer pretending this was a leisurely stroll. The trail seemed different going back, the rocks sharper, the trees closing in. Twice I was sure we'd passed the same boulder, a distinctive chunk of granite that looked like a crouching bear, but Marcus insisted we were still on the right path. When we finally emerged at the trailhead, the RV sitting squat and solid in the parking area, I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. But as we approached, I saw something that stopped me cold. The RV's exterior was covered in handprints. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, pressed into the aluminum siding in that same oily residue I'd seen on the windows. They clustered around the door, the windows, even up on the roof where no one could reach without a ladder. Some were large, adult-sized. Others were small, child-sized. And they all seemed to be reaching, grasping, as if trying to get inside. "What the hell?" Marcus said, his voice strangled. He approached the RV slowly, reaching out to touch one of the prints. When he pulled his hand back, his fingers were coated in something viscous and faintly green, like rotten oil. This is not condensation. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now. We need to leave right now." "Chloe, wait!" "Marcus, look at them. They're everywhere. Someone did this while we were hiking. Someone, or—" I couldn't finish the thought. The prints seemed to writhe in my peripheral vision, the whorls and ridges forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. Marcus pulled out his phone, started taking pictures. "We should document this. Call the rangers, report vandalism, or—" "Your phone doesn't work, remember? No signal." And I don't want to wait around for whoever did this to come back. He looked at me, really looked at me, and must have seen something in my face that scared him, because he nodded. Okay, we'll pack up and head to a different site. There are other camping areas in the forest. We'll find one that's more populated, with other campers around. It took us 20 minutes to break camp, and every second I felt eyes on me. The fog had thickened again, reducing visibility to just a few feet. Sounds echoed strangely. Our footsteps seemed to come from the wrong directions, and twice I heard what might have been breathing, slow and wet, just beyond the curtain of gray. Marcus tried to wipe down the RV's exterior, but the oily residue just smeared, and after a few minutes he gave up, his hands stained green to the wrists. "It won't come off," he muttered. "What the fuck is this stuff?" I didn't answer. I was staring at the tree line, where I'd just seen movement. Several figures, human-shaped but wrong, standing just inside the fog. As I watched, one of them raised a hand and pressed it against an invisible barrier, and I saw its palm leave that distinctive print in the air itself, the fog swirling around the shape of its fingers. "Get in the RV," I said. "Marcus, get in the RV now." We scrambled inside and he fired up the engine, which sputtered and coughed before catching. The headlights cut weak tunnels through the fog, illuminating more of those figures, dozens of them now standing among the trees in a loose circle around our campsite. They didn't move as we pulled away, just watched with faces I couldn't quite see, their hands raised as if waving goodbye. The road out of Dolly Sods is a narrow, winding track of dirt and gravel, barely wide enough for the RV. In good weather, it's challenging. In the fog, it was a nightmare. Marcus drove at a crawl, leaning forward until his nose nearly touched the windshield, trying to follow the barely visible edge of the road. I kept watch out the side window, but there was nothing to see except that suffocating grayness and occasionally, disturbingly, more handprints appearing on the glass from the outside, as if invisible hands were running along the RV as we moved. "How far to the main road?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "Should be about 6 miles. Maybe 20 minutes at this pace." We'd gone perhaps 2 miles when the road simply ended. One moment there was packed dirt ahead of us, the next moment nothing but forest. Trees growing so close together no vehicle could pass between them. "This isn't right," Marcus said, throwing the RV into park. "This isn't fucking right. The road goes straight through here. I saw it on the map. Back up. We'll turn around, find another way." But when he shifted into reverse and looked in the mirrors, the road behind us was gone too. Just trees, pressing close, their branches scraping against the RV's sides with a sound like fingernails on metal. "This isn't possible," Marcus whispered. "Roads don't just disappear. This is a hallucination. We're having a shared hallucination. Maybe there's carbon monoxide in the RV or—" A hand slammed against the driver's side window. We both screamed. The hand was pressed flat against the glass, fingers splayed, and it left that oily residue behind as it slowly dragged downward. Then another hand hit the passenger window, and another on the windshield, and another, and another, and another, until the entire RV was surrounded by the sound of palms slapping against metal and glass, a cacophony of wet impacts that made my teeth ache. "Drive!" I shrieked. "Just drive. Go through the trees if you have to." Marcus slammed the accelerator and the RV lurched forward, crashing through undergrowth and small saplings. Branches screeched along the sides and something heavy thudded onto the roof, then rolled off. The fog seemed to thicken with our movement, becoming almost solid, and the windshield wipers couldn't keep up with the oily residue that now coated every surface. We burst out of the trees into another clearing and Marcus hit the brakes so hard I flew forward against my seatbelt. In front of us was our campsite. The same fire pit, the same picnic table, the same trees arranged in the exact same configuration. We'd driven in a complete circle, or the forest had moved around us, or something impossible had happened. "This is wrong," Marcus said, and I heard real panic in his voice now. "This is all wrong, Chloe. We need to—" The engine died. Marcus turned the key, pumped the gas, but nothing happened. The RV's interior lights flickered once, twice, then went dark, leaving us in the gray half-light that filtered through the fog. In the silence that followed, I heard breathing that wasn't ours. It came from all around, slow and rhythmic, as if the forest itself had lungs. And beneath it, quieter, the sound of something dragging through the leaves. Many somethings circling the RV in a tightening spiral. "Lock the doors," I whispered. "All of them." We moved through the RV, checking every lock, every window. The back bedroom door was open. I knew with absolute certainty that we'd closed it when we left that morning. But now it hung ajar, and beyond it the small sleeping space was dark. Too dark, as if the shadows inside were thicker than they should be. Marcus started to move toward it, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't. We have to close it. We have to—" The door swung shut on its own. Click, the sound of the lock engaging from the inside. We stood frozen in the narrow hallway, staring at that closed door. From behind it came a sound like laughter, high and childlike, but with a quality that made it clear this was not a child, had never been a child, was just something that knew what children were supposed to sound like. "There's someone in there," Marcus breathed. "There's someone in our fucking RV." He lunged for the door handle, but I pulled him back. No, we can't open it. We don't open it. We stay in the front. We wait for morning." "Morning? Chloe, it's not even 3 p.m. We have hours before dark." But when I looked at my watch, the hands were spinning, clicking around the face too fast to track. Forward, then backward, then forward again, as if time itself had become unstuck. A handprint appeared on the inside of the window above the sink. Then another, and another. They blossomed across every surface like flowers, oily and wrong, and where they touched, the material seemed to rot, to soften, to become permeable. "The fog is coming in," I said, and it was true. Thin tendrils of gray were seeping through the walls, around the window frames, under the doors. It carried that smell with it, the smell I'd been trying not to acknowledge all day, rot and sweetness and something chemical, like formaldehyde. Marcus grabbed the fire extinguisher from its mount by the stove. "If something comes through that door, I'm going to bash its fucking head in." "Marcus, I'm not dying out here, Chloe. I'm not going to just stand here and let something take us." The laughter from the bedroom intensified, and we heard footsteps, small ones, running back and forth across the floor. Then the door began to bulge outward, the wood creaking as if something was pressing against it from the inside with incredible force. "Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God," I chanted, backing against the counter, feeling for the knife block with shaking hands. The door burst open and something crawled out. I saw it for only a second before Marcus swung the fire extinguisher, but that second branded itself into my brain with surgical precision. It was child-sized, yes, but that's where the resemblance ended. Its limbs bent the wrong way, joints appearing where no joints should be. Its skin was the same gray as the fog, slick with that oily residue. And its hands, God, its hands were enormous, each finger as long as my forearm, tipped with something that might have been nails or might have been claws or might have been something else entirely. Marcus's swing connected with its head, and the thing made a sound like tearing fabric. But it didn't fall. It scrambled up the wall, defying gravity, moving with a terrible speed, and those long fingers reached for Marcus's face. I lunged forward with the knife and drove it into the thing's back. The blade sank in easily, too easily, as if its body was made of fog-given substance. It shrieked and released Marcus, dropping to the floor and skittering backward into the bedroom on those wrong joints. The door slammed shut again, and we heard it in there, making sounds no throat should make, a wet clicking that raised every hair on my body. "We're leaving," Marcus said, blood running from where one of those fingers had scored his cheek. "We're leaving right now. We're walking if we have to." But when we tried the door, it wouldn't open. The handle turned, the lock disengaged, but the door itself seemed fused to its frame, as if the fog had welded it shut. Marcus threw his shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times, but it didn't budge. "The emergency exit," I said. "The roof hatch." We climbed onto the dining table and I reached up to twist the handle of the skylight. It popped open, letting in a wash of cold, damp air and the smell of rot so strong it made me gag. Marcus boosted me up and I pulled myself onto the roof, then turned to help him. The roof was covered in handprints. They formed patterns, spirals, and symbols that might have been writing in a language that predated language. And standing in the fog around the RV were the figures. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe, all perfectly still, all watching with faces that were almost human but not quite, as if someone had sculpted people from memory rather than observation. Marcus hauled himself up beside me and we stood there, backs pressed together, turning slowly to take in the ring of watchers. The fog pressed against my skin with an almost physical pressure, and I realized I could see the handprints it was making on my jacket, on my arms, on my face. Invisible hands touching me, leaving their mark. "They're not moving," Marcus whispered. "Why aren't they moving?" "I don't know. I don't know. I don't—" One of them took a step forward, then another. They moved in unison, the entire circle contracting, and I saw that their hands were raised, palms out, all those oily fingers reaching. "Jump," I said. "We jump and we run. Chloe, we're 10 feet up. We die if we stay here. Jump." I leaped off the side of the RV, landing hard on my ankle, feeling something twist but not break. Marcus landed beside me with a grunt, and then we were running, crashing through the undergrowth, the fog so thick I couldn't see my own feet. Behind us I heard sounds of pursuit. Not footsteps, but that dragging sound, as if hundreds of hands were pulling bodies across the forest floor. We ran until my lungs burned, until the taste of blood filled my mouth, until my legs were rubber and my vision sparkled with black spots. The fog never thinned. The trees never ended. And always, just behind us, I heard breathing that wasn't ours and the soft slap of palms against bark, against earth, against reality itself. Marcus fell first. His foot caught on a root or a rock or nothing at all, and he went down hard, his head connecting with something solid with a sound like a melon splitting. I skidded to a stop, dropped beside him, saw blood on his temple and his eyes rolled back, showing white. "No, no, no, Marcus. Get up. Please get up." The fog pressed closer, and I saw them emerging from it. Those figures with their 2 long fingers and their not quite human faces. They formed a circle around us, and as one they knelt, pressing their palms to the ground. Where they touched, the earth became soft, boggy, and I felt us starting to sink. "Please," I begged, not knowing what I was asking for, not knowing if they could understand or if they cared. "Please, he didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. We just wanted to camp." One of them tilted its head, and for a moment I saw through the fog that made up its face to something beneath, something that might have been human once, a very long time ago. Its mouth moved, and I heard words that weren't words, syllables in a register that made my bones ache. Then it reached out one impossibly long finger and touched my forehead, and I was somewhere else. I saw Dolly Sods as it had been. Before it was Dolly Sods, before it had a name at all. I saw the people who had lived here, hunted here, died here. I saw the battles fought on this soil, bodies falling and not rising, blood feeding the hungry earth. I saw the military arrive with their shells and their mortars, saw them blast the earth into submission, saw chemicals seep into the groundwater and the trees die and grow back wrong. And I saw what came after, when the land remembered its dead, when the fog learned to remember the shape of hands, when the boundary between what was and what is became permeable. The vision released me, and I was back in my body, sinking into earth that was no longer earth. Marcus unconscious beside me, his face now smeared with that oily residue. The figures watched with patient interest as the ground claimed us inch by inch. I thought about my mother, about the cancer we'd thought was gone but which I now knew would come back, would take her from me the way this place was taking Marcus. I thought about all the things I'd meant to say to him and hadn't, about the proposal ring I'd found hidden in his sock drawer 2 months ago, about the life we wouldn't get to live. And then I thought, no, I don't know where the rage came from, but it flooded through me like fire, burning away the terror. I lurched to my feet, hauling Marcus up with strength I didn't know I possessed. The earth tried to hold us, but I tore us free, and when one of the figures reached for me, I swung my fist and connected with its face, feeling my knuckles pass through fog and strike something solid beneath, something that crunched. It recoiled, and the others did too, a ripple of movement passing through the circle. They were afraid. I could see it in the way they pulled back, in the hesitation in their movements. They fed on fear, on helplessness, but raw anger confused them. I dragged Marcus backward, step by step, my eyes never leaving the figures. "You don't get to have us," I said, my voice hoarse. "You don't get to take him. You don't get to take me. We're leaving, and you're going to let us." They didn't respond, just watched with those almost faces, but they didn't follow either. The fog began to thin, just slightly, and I saw something through it, a glint of metal, a shape that might have been a vehicle. I pulled Marcus toward it, moving faster, the figures parting before us like water. The shape resolved into a ranger's truck, and inside I could see a man in uniform, his face slack with sleep or something worse. I pounded on the window with my free hand, leaving bloody smears. "Help us! Please, you have to help us!" The ranger's eyes snapped open and he jerked upright, looking at me with an expression of pure horror. Not at me, I realized, but at what was behind me. He threw open the door and grabbed my arm, hauling both me and Marcus into the truck, then slammed the door and hit the locks. "Jesus Christ, how did you—" "No one comes back from that deep in the fog. No one—" "Drive," I gasped. "Please just drive. Get us out of here." He didn't argue, just started the engine and gunned it, the truck fishtailing on the loose gravel. I looked back and saw the figures standing in a line at the edge of the clearing, their hands raised, and the fog behind them was thick with more shapes. Hundreds more. Thousands, maybe. All the things that had died in this place and come back wrong. The ranger drove in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, following roads I couldn't see through a fog that gradually, grudgingly thinned. When we finally burst out into clear air and autumn sunshine, I wanted to cry, but my body had forgotten how. He took us to a hospital in Elkins, where they treated Marcus for a concussion and me for shock and exposure. Marcus woke up after 6 hours with no memory of anything after we'd started hiking, which the doctor said was normal with head trauma, but which I knew was something else. A mercy, maybe. Or a warning. The ranger came to see us before we left. His name was Tom Hendricks, and he'd worked dolly sods for 15 years. "I'm not supposed to talk about this," he said, looking at his hands rather than at us. "But you deserve to know. That fog, it's been there as long as anyone can remember. Usually it stays in the deep woods, but sometimes, when it's hungry or when someone wanders too far off trail, it spreads. We lose people every few years. Not many. The Park Service is careful. They close trails when the fog is bad, but some." "What is it?" I asked. "What are those things?" "I don't know. My grandfather used to say it's the land itself, remembering. All the violence it's seen, all the blood it's drunk. He said some places hold on to their dead, and Dolly Sods is one of them." He met my eyes. "You're the first people I've seen come back from that deep in. Whatever you did, whatever you said to them, it worked. But if I were you, I'd leave West Virginia and never come back." We did. We left that day, abandoning the RV to the rental company with a story about mechanical failure that no one quite believed. Marcus recovered physically, though he still sometimes wakes screaming from dreams he can't remember. I'm okay, mostly. I can function. I can work, can eat, can pretend to be normal. But every morning, when I get up and the windows are fogged with condensation, I see them. Handprints pressed against the glass from the outside, whorls and ridges distinct, as if invisible hands have been touching the windows all night. I wipe them away, but the oily residue remains, green and slick, and I know they're still out there, somewhere in the fog that never truly lifts. Marcus can't see them. When I point them out, he just sees condensation, normal moisture from the temperature differential. But I see them, and I know what they mean. The fog remembers us. And someday, maybe not today or tomorrow, but someday, it's going to come back to claim what it thinks it's owed. Until then, I live with those handprints, watching them appear each morning like a promise or a threat, reminding me that some places never let you go, that some debts can only be postponed, never paid. And at night, when I close my eyes, I'm back in that clearing, sinking into earth that isn't earth, surrounded by figures with 2 long fingers and faces that are almost human but not quite. I feel them touching me, leaving their marks, and I wake with my skin slick with something green and oily that the shower can't quite wash away. Marcus notices sometimes. He'll touch my arm and pull his hand back, looking at his fingers with confusion before wiping them on his jeans. But he doesn't ask, and I don't tell him. What would I say? That we're marked now? That the fog left something in us, or on us, or both? That every day the handprints multiply, spreading from the windows to the mirrors to the walls? Last week I found one on the bathroom ceiling. This morning there was one on Marcus's pillow right beside where his head had been. The fog is getting closer. I can feel it pressing against the edges of my life, seeping through the cracks. And the worst part is, I don't think we're the only ones marked. I see others sometimes, people with that same slick sheen to their skin, that same haunted look in their eyes. We recognize each other. We marked ones. We pass into grocery stores, on city streets, and we exchange glances that say, "You were there too. You went into the fog and it let you go." But it didn't really let us go, did it? We're still in the fog. We'll always be in the fog. And someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, those handprints are going to open like doorways, and the things we ran from are going to reach through and pull us back to where we belong. The fog remembers. The fog always remembers. And it's patient. Story 5. I'm Chloe, 34. The silence at Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness in Oregon didn't wait. It hunted. I should have known something was wrong when the birds stopped singing 3 miles before we reached the trailhead. My boyfriend Marcus kept driving our rented RV deeper into the forest, past the last ranger station, past the hand-painted signs warning about road conditions, past the point where my phone lost its last bar of signal. The Clackamas River rushed somewhere to our left, but even that sound seemed muted, swallowed by the dense canopy of Douglas fir and western hemlock that pressed against the narrow logging road. "This is perfect," Marcus said, pulling into a clearing that looked like it had been carved from the forest with angry hands. Stumps jutted from the earth at odd angles, and the grass grew in patches, brown and sickly despite it being late June. No one else for miles, just us and the wilderness. That was exactly what worried me. Marcus had been talking about this trip for months, ever since his promotion fell through at the architecture firm. He needed to disconnect, to find clarity, to remember what matters. I'd agreed because I loved him, because after 4 years together, I'd learned to recognize when he was spiraling, when the pressure in his head built to dangerous levels. But standing there in that clearing, watching shadows pool between the trees despite the afternoon sun, I felt my stomach clench with primal unease. The RV's engine ticked as it cooled. Marcus was already outside, stretching his arms above his head, breathing deeply. I could see the tension leaving his shoulders, the lines around his eyes softening. He looked younger, almost boyish, and I felt guilty for my apprehension. "Come on, Chloe," he called. "Help me set up the awning. We should get comfortable before dark." I climbed down from the passenger seat, my hiking boots crunching on gravel and broken pine needles. The air smelled wrong, not the clean scent of mountain wilderness I expected, but something older, damper, like the inside of a closed-up house, like breath held too long. We worked in companionable silence, Marcus humming tunelessly as he secured the awning, me arranging our camp chairs and portable table. The silence bothered me more as we worked. No birds, no squirrels chittering, no buzz of insects. Just the distant whisper of the river and the soft susurrus of wind through the high branches. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Marcus looked up from checking the RV's stabilizer jacks. "Hear what?" "Exactly. Nothing. No birds, no animals." He shrugged. "Maybe we scared them off, or maybe there's a predator nearby. Mountain lion or something. They'll come back." But they didn't. As the afternoon wore into evening, the silence deepened. It felt textured, layered, like it was pressing against my eardrums from the outside. I'd read about this phenomenon once, how certain frequencies could create feelings of unease, how infrasound below human hearing could trigger anxiety. But this was different. This silence wasn't an absence of sound. It was a presence, thick and suffocating, watching us from the gaps between the trees. Marcus made dinner on the propane stove, pasta with jarred sauce, simple and hot. We ate outside as the sun sank behind the ridge, painting the sky in shades of copper and rust. The temperature dropped fast, and I pulled on my fleece jacket, hugging myself against the sudden cold. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His fingers were warm, solid, real. This is what we needed. Time to just be together. No phones, no emails, no bullshit. I squeezed his hand back, trying to push down the anxiety coiling in my chest. Yeah, it's beautiful. But it wasn't. The beauty was wrong, somehow. Too perfect, like a painting where the perspective is slightly off and you can't quite pinpoint why it makes you dizzy to look at it. The shadows between the trees were too deep, too dark, and they seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, expanding and contracting like something breathing. We cleaned up and moved inside the RV as full darkness fell. Marcus pulled out a deck of cards and we played gin rummy, drinking cheap whiskey from plastic cups. He was relaxed, genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. I tried to match his mood, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was listening to us from just beyond the thin aluminum walls. Around 10, Marcus yawned and suggested we turn in. I nodded, suddenly exhausted, the whiskey making my head fuzzy. We brushed our teeth using bottled water, changed into sleep clothes, and climbed into the RV's cramped bed above the cab. Marcus fell asleep almost instantly, his breathing evening out into deep, regular rhythms. I lay awake, staring at the curved ceiling inches from my face. The silence outside was absolute now, a living thing that seemed to seep through the walls and windows, filling the RV like water. My ears rang with it, a high-pitched whine that grew louder the more I tried to ignore it. Then I heard it, a soft sound, barely there, footsteps on gravel. I froze, every muscle tensing. The footsteps circled the RV slowly, deliberately. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I held my breath, listening. Marcus snored softly beside me, oblivious. The footsteps stopped at the door. I waited, heart hammering so hard I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. Seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing happened. No knock, no attempt at the handle. Just silence again. Heavier now, oppressive. I must have finally slept because I woke to pale gray light filtering through the window and Marcus's side of the bed empty. Panic spiked through me until I heard him whistling in the main cabin, the smell of coffee drifting up from below. "Morning, sleepyhead," he called when he heard me moving. "Coffee's ready. I was thinking we could hike up to Huckleberry Mountain today. The ranger said the views are incredible." I climbed down, my body stiff and sore despite the mattress. "What ranger?" "We didn't talk to any ranger," Marcus frowned. "At the station, yesterday. Don't you remember? Older guy, gray beard. He told us about the trails." I stared at him. "Marcus, the ranger station was closed. There was a sign." "No, I talked to him. He was really helpful." Marcus's frown deepened. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." I accepted the coffee cup he handed me, wrapping both hands around it for warmth. Had there been a ranger? I remembered the closed station, the dusty windows, the parking lot empty except for our vehicle. But Marcus seemed so certain. "I must have zoned out," I said finally. "I didn't sleep great. The silence getting to you." He smiled, but there was something off about it, a slight asymmetry I'd never noticed before. "It's peaceful once you get used to it." We ate breakfast, instant oatmeal and the coffee, and prepared for our hike. I stuffed my backpack with water bottles, trail mix, and a first aid kit while Marcus studied the map we'd printed before leaving Portland. The paper crinkled loudly in the stillness, and I found myself wincing at the noise. The trail started just beyond our clearing, marked by a weathered wooden sign. The path was narrow, overgrown, clearly not maintained regularly. Salal and Oregon grape pressed in from both sides, their leaves wet with dew that soaked my pants almost immediately. Marcus led the way, energized by the prospect of the hike. I followed, trying to focus on the rhythm of walking, the burn in my calves as we climbed. But the silence followed us. It wrapped around us like fog, muffling every sound we made until even our footsteps seemed to come from far away. After an hour, Marcus stopped abruptly. I nearly ran into his back. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Ahead, about 30 feet up the trail, something stood in the path. At first, I thought it was a deer. We were in the right habitat, the right elevation. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too narrow. It stood on 2 legs. "Is that a person?" I asked, my voice barely audible even to myself. The figure didn't move. It stood perfectly still, facing us. I couldn't make out details. The shadows under the trees were too deep, but I could feel its attention, focused and intense. "Hey!" Marcus called out. "Hello?" The figure remained motionless. My skin prickled with goosebumps that had nothing to do with the cold. Something was deeply wrong about the way it stood, the angle of its limbs, the tilt of its head. "Maybe they're hurt," Marcus said. He started forward. I grabbed his arm. "Wait, don't. Chloe, they might need help. There's something wrong with them." He pulled free, irritation flashing across his face. "You're being paranoid." He walked forward, calling out reassurances. I stayed where I was, every instinct screaming at me to run. Marcus got within 10 feet of the figure, then 5. He reached out a hand. The figure turned and walked off the trail, disappearing into the dense undergrowth without a sound. No rustling of bushes, no snap of twigs. Just there, then gone. Marcus stood frozen, his hand still extended. When he turned back to me, his face was white. "That wasn't right," he said. "I know. We should go back." I'd never agreed with anything more in my life. We turned and hurried down the trail, no longer trying to enjoy the hike, just wanting to reach the safety of the RV. But something was wrong. The trail looked different. The landmarks I'd noted on the way up, a distinctive twisted tree, a boulder shaped like a crouching bear, weren't where they should be. "Are we going the right way?" I asked. Marcus checked his compass, then checked it again, frowning. "According to this, we're heading east. But we should be going west. Maybe it's broken. It's brand new. I checked it this morning." We kept walking, but the trail seemed to stretch on forever. We should have reached the clearing by now. My watch said we'd been hiking back for over 2 hours, but that was impossible. The climb up had taken less than 90 minutes. "Marcus, something's wrong." I know. He pulled out the map, spreading it against a tree trunk. His hands were shaking. "We should be here, but nothing looks right." That's when I realized I couldn't hear the river anymore. The Clackamas had been a constant presence, its white noise audible from miles away. Now there was nothing but the silence, pressing in, growing heavier with each passing moment. The silence began to hurt. A physical pressure in my ears, building, like descending in an airplane but worse. I swallowed hard, trying to pop them, but the pressure only increased. "Marcus, my ears." "Mine too," he grimaced, pressing his palms against the sides of his head. "What the hell is happening?" The silence grew louder. That sounds insane, but it's the only way I can describe it. The absence of sound became a presence, a roar of nothingness that filled my head until I wanted to scream just to break it. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. The silence swallowed my voice before it could form. Marcus's mouth was moving. He was shouting something, his face contorted with effort. But I heard nothing. The silence crushed everything, compressed it into nothing. Then, cutting through the impossible quiet, I heard it. A whisper. "Chloe," my name, spoken in a voice I didn't recognize. A child's voice, high and sweet. "Chloe, help me." Marcus grabbed my arm. He'd heard it too. His eyes were wide, terrified. The whisper came again from somewhere ahead on the trail. "I'm lost. Please help me." Every fiber of my being screamed at me not to follow that voice. But what if it really was a child? What if someone was hurt, lost in these woods? Marcus made the decision for us, moving toward the sound. I followed because I couldn't let him go alone. The trail opened into a small clearing I didn't remember passing before. In the center stood a figure. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a dirty white dress. Her hair hung in dark tangles around her face. She stood completely still, head down, hands at her sides. "Hey, sweetie," Marcus called out, his voice sounding muffled and distant despite him being right next to me. "Are you lost? Are your parents nearby?" The girl didn't respond. She just stood there, swaying slightly. "Honey, we want to help you," I tried, inching forward. The girl's head snapped up and I saw her face. My blood turned to ice. She had no eyes, just smooth skin where her eyes should have been. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, wider than any human mouth should open, and the whisper came again, but this time from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the ground, from inside my own skull. "I'm hungry." Marcus staggered backward and we both ran. We crashed through the undergrowth, branches tearing at our clothes and skin. Behind us, I could hear footsteps. Light, rapid, the footsteps of a child running. But they were too fast, covering ground too quickly, getting closer. The silence shattered. It broke apart into a cacophony of sounds. Screaming, laughing, crying, all the voices of children, dozens of them, hundreds, echoing through the forest. The pressure in my ears spiked, and I felt something warm trickle down the side of my neck. Blood. We burst into a clearing, and there was the RV. Thank God, the RV. Marcus fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them. I snatched them up, unlocked the door, and we threw ourselves inside, slamming it behind us. The sounds stopped instantly. The silence returned, heavier than before, suffocating. Marcus's nose was bleeding. So were his ears. He looked at me and his face went pale. "Chloe, your eyes." I stumbled to the bathroom mirror. Thin streams of blood leaked from the corners of my eyes, mixing with the blood from my ears. I looked like I was crying blood. "We need to leave," I said. "Now." Marcus nodded. He climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine cranked once, twice, 3 times. It didn't start. Come on," he muttered, trying again. "Nothing. What's wrong with it?" "I don't know. It was fine this morning." A knock on the door. 3 precise taps. We both froze. Another knock, the same 3 taps, perfectly spaced. "Don't answer it," I whispered. Marcus didn't move. The knocking came again, and this time a voice accompanied it. "Marcus? Chloe? I can hear you in there." It was Marcus's voice, his exact voice, coming from outside. We stared at each other. Marcus's face had gone gray. "Marcus, buddy, open up. It's me." The voice outside laughed. "Who else would it be?" "That's not me," Marcus breathed. "I know." The doorknob rattled. I'd locked it. Thank God I'd locked it. The rattling grew more violent, the whole door shaking in its frame. Then it stopped. Silence again, but different now. Waiting. Patient. "Maybe it's gone," Marcus said after several minutes. "Or maybe it wants us to think that." We sat in the RV as afternoon faded to evening. Neither of us spoke. The silence pressed in, and the pressure in my ears grew worse. Every swallow sent spikes of pain through my head. More blood trickled from my nose, from my ears. Marcus was the same, his shirt collar stained dark red. When full dark fell, the sounds began. Footsteps circling the RV, dozens of them, all out of sync, scratching on the walls, on the roof. Voices whispering, too low to make out words. And underneath it all, a low humming that I felt more than heard, a vibration that made my bones ache. "What do they want?" Marcus asked. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. "I don't know. Why is this happening?" I had no answer. I pulled out my phone, no signal of course, and scrolled through my photos looking at pictures of our life before. Marcus and me at his sister's wedding, at the coast, at our favorite restaurant. Normal moments from a normal life that felt impossibly far away now. The scratching grew more insistent. Something was digging at the door seal. I could hear the metal scraping. Then it stopped, and a child's voice spoke directly outside the door, so close it might have been pressed against the thin aluminum. "Let us in. We're cold. We're hungry. Let us in." "Go away," Marcus shouted. "Leave us alone." Laughter responded, high and cruel. "You came to our home. You brought your metal house into our woods. You're the guests, and guests should be polite." The RV rocked suddenly, violently, like something massive had struck it. We were thrown against the walls. It rocked again, and I realized with growing horror that they were trying to tip it over. "We have to do something," Marcus yelled. "Like what?" The rocking continued, each impact harder than the last. Dishes crashed from the cupboards. The portable table collapsed. I grabbed onto the counter as the RV tilted at a sickening angle, held there for a moment, then crashed back down. In the sudden stillness that followed, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of the driver's door opening. "Marcus, did you lock?" A figure climbed into the cab. It moved wrong, joints bending at angles that weren't quite right. In the darkness, I could only make out a silhouette, but the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, proportions that didn't make sense. It turned its head toward us, and in the dim light I saw its face. My face. Every detail perfect, from the scar above my left eyebrow to the mole on my cheek. But the eyes were dead, empty, and the smile was all wrong. "Hello, Marcus," it said in my voice. "Aren't you going to say hello to your girlfriend?" Marcus made a sound I'd never heard from him before, a broken animal sound of pure terror. The thing wearing my face laughed and climbed through the cab, moving toward us with jerky, puppet-like movements. I grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter, the one we'd used to cut vegetables for dinner a lifetime ago. "Stay back." "Chloe," it said, still using my voice, "why would you hurt yourself? Don't you know that would be suicide?" It lunged. I slashed out instinctively and the knife connected, sinking into its arm. It didn't bleed. It just looked down at the blade protruding from its flesh with mild curiosity, then pulled it free and dropped it on the floor. "That wasn't very nice," it said. Marcus suddenly pushed past me, shoving the thing backward with all his strength. It stumbled, giving us a moment. "Run!" he screamed. We burst out the door, into the night, into the forest. The silence was gone now, replaced by a chorus of voices, laughing, screaming, singing. Shadows moved between the trees, dozens of them, hundreds, all converging on us. We ran blindly, branches tearing at our faces, roots catching our feet. I fell hard, my palms scraping across rock and pine needles. Marcus hauled me up, and we kept running. The forest shifted around us. Trees that should have been there weren't. Paths appeared and disappeared. We were running in circles, I realized, with growing despair. We'd passed that distinctive twisted tree 3 times now. The forest was playing with us, hurting us. Marcus stopped suddenly, gasping for breath. We'd reached some kind of clearing, but it was wrong. The ground was bare earth, hard-packed and circular, about 30 feet across. Nothing grew there. In the center was a ring of stones, and in the middle of that ring something dark and wet gleamed. "What is this place?" Marcus whispered. The voices had stopped. The silence returned, absolute and crushing. My ears rang with it, the pressure building to unbearable levels. I felt blood running freely from my nose now, from my ears, from my tear ducts. Then the silence spoke. It wasn't a voice exactly. It was the absence of voice given form, a negation of sound that somehow conveyed meaning directly into my brain. It bypassed my ears entirely, imprinting itself on my consciousness. "You walked into our hunger. You fed us with your noise, your light, your warmth. But it's not enough. It's never enough." I understood then. The silence wasn't empty. It was hungry. It had been hungry for so long, waiting in this forgotten pocket of forest, feeding on whatever wandered into its domain. The girl, the voices, the doppelgangers. They were all manifestations of its hunger, puppets crafted from the memories and fears of those it had consumed before us. We could let you go. But you'd never really leave. You'd hear us in every quiet moment. You'd feel us in every silence. We'd follow you home, ride in your metal house back to your loud, bright world, and there, oh there, we could feast. What do you want? I managed to choke out. One of you. One to feed us, one to sate us, one to silence forever. Choose, or we take both. Marcus and I looked at each other. In the starlight filtering through the canopy, I could see blood covering his face, dark and wet. I'm sure I looked the same. His hand found mine, squeezed it. I love you, he said. I love you too. Choose. Take me, Marcus said. No, take me, he said again, stronger. He looked at the dark center of the stone circle. Let her go. Let Chloe go, and I'll stay. It is agreed. Marcus, no. I grabbed his arm, but he pulled free. One of us has to get out, he said. One of us has to warn people. Tell them not to come here. Tell them about this place. He touched my face, his fingers gentle despite the blood. You're stronger than me, Chloe. You always have been. You can make it out. I can't leave you here. You have to. He smiled, and it was his real smile, the one I'd fallen in love with. Go. Now, before it changes its mind. The shadows around the clearing began to move, closing in. Marcus walked toward the center of the stone circle, toward that dark, wet, gleaming thing I didn't want to look at too closely. Run, Chloe, he said without turning around. Run, and don't look back. I ran. I left him there, and I ran. Tears and blood mixing on my face, the silence pressing in around me, but somehow not as heavy now, as if it had gotten what it wanted and was loosening its grip. The forest opened up ahead of me. I saw lights, headlights, and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the rumble of an engine. A truck stopped on the logging road. A ranger, a real ranger this time, young woman with concern on her face, climbing out. Ma'am, are you all right? We got a report of an abandoned RV. I collapsed. The next few hours were a blur. The hospital in Estacada, doctors puzzling over my burst eardrums and the hemorrhaging in my eyes, the police taking my statement about my missing boyfriend. They searched the Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness for 2 weeks. They found our RV in that clearing, but they never found Marcus. The ground in the stone circle was undisturbed, they said. No sign of anyone. They assumed he'd gotten lost, fallen into the river perhaps, been taken by animals. They didn't believe my story. How could they? But they were kind enough not to commit me. After a month, they called off the search. Marcus's family held a memorial. I attended, but couldn't speak. That was 4 months ago. My eardrums healed mostly. I can hear again, though everything sounds muted, distant. The doctors said the damage to my eyes was permanent. I see blood sometimes, dark streaks at the corners of my vision that aren't really there. Trauma, they say. PTSD. But they're wrong. I know what I saw. I know what's out there in those woods, in that pocket of hungry silence that feeds on the lost and the wandering. And I know Marcus was wrong about one thing. It did follow me home. I hear it in my apartment at night when the city falls quiet. I feel it in the gaps between sounds, in the pauses between heartbeats. It's there, always there, waiting in the silence. It got a taste of our world when I fled, a small piece of it clinging to me like a burr. Sometimes I hear Marcus's voice in the quiet, calling my name. Sometimes I see him standing at the edge of the parking lot when I leave for work or in the reflection of shop windows. He's always just at the edge of my vision, always watching. The silence grows a little stronger each night. The pressure in my ears returns sometimes, building, building. I know what it means. It's not satisfied. One sacrifice wasn't enough. It wants more. It wants to spread, to seep out of those forgotten woods and into the spaces where people gather, where people live. I tried to warn the Forest Service, tried to tell them about that clearing, that stone circle. They were polite, but dismissive. A woman traumatized by losing her boyfriend in a hiking accident, seeing patterns where there are none. They assured me the Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness is perfectly safe. People camp there all the time. I imagine them sometimes, those other campers, families with children, couples seeking solitude, solo hikers looking for peace. I imagine them driving their RVs and cars down that logging road, setting up camp in clearings that look peaceful. I imagine them noticing, as the sun sets, that the forest is quiet. Too quiet. I tried to go back once, a month after they stopped looking for Marcus. I made it as far as the ranger station before the panic attack hit. The crushing pressure, the blood, the voices. I turned around and drove straight home, hands shaking on the wheel. I still have nightmares. In them, I'm back in that clearing, and Marcus is standing in the stone circle. But when he turns to look at me, his face is smooth and featureless, like the girl's. His mouth opens too wide and the silence pours out, thick and viscous and hungry. I wake up choking, convinced that the silence has finally come for me, that I only escaped temporarily, that the deal was never real, that it was toying with me, letting me run so it could learn how to follow, how to spread into the wider world. Sometimes I think I should go back, offer myself like Marcus did. Maybe then it would be satisfied. Maybe then it would stop spreading, but I'm a coward. I survived, and I cling to that survival even though I know it came at too high a price. The doctors tell me I should move on. Grief counselors talk about acceptance and healing. They don't understand. How can you move on when you can feel the thing you're grieving, watching you, waiting for you, following you through every quiet moment? Last week, my neighbor complained about the noise from my apartment. She said I play the TV and radio too loud, all hours of the day and night. I tried to explain. I need the noise. I need to fill the silence. I can't let it grow. She didn't understand. The landlord sent a warning. If I don't keep it down, I'll be evicted. So I've been looking for a new place, somewhere with thin walls and noisy neighbors, somewhere near a busy street where the traffic never stops. Somewhere I'll never have to experience true silence again. But I know it's futile. The silence is patient. It waited decades, maybe centuries in those woods. It can wait for me. And one day, when I'm tired or distracted or just worn down by the effort of constant noise, it will slip through. It will press in through my ears and my eyes and my mouth, and it will take what it's owed. I write this as a warning, though I know no one will heed it. Stay away from the salmon huckleberry wilderness. Stay away from the logging roads east of the Clackamas River. Don't camp in clearings that feel too perfect, too empty. If you find yourself in a forest where no birds sing, where no insects buzz, where the silence presses against you like a living thing, leave. Leave immediately, and don't look back. And if you hear someone calling your name from the darkness, in a voice you recognize, know that it's not them. It's never them. It's only the hunger, wearing their face, speaking with their voice, trying to lure you in. The silence has learned to speak now. It learned from Marcus and from me, and from everyone else it's consumed over the years. It knows our words, our fears, our love, and it uses them against us. I can feel it now, pressing against the edges of my apartment, seeping in through the cracks around the windows, pooling in the corners where the TV's light doesn't reach. The pressure is building in my ears again. I taste blood at the back of my throat. It's almost time. Marcus bought me 4 months, 4 months of reprieve. But the deal is coming due. I'm writing this on my laptop, fingers shaking, tears blurring my vision. I'll post it online before I go. Maybe someone will read it. Maybe someone will believe. Maybe it will save even one person from making the same mistake we did, from thinking that silence is peaceful, that isolation is safe. The pressure is unbearable now. Blood is dripping from my nose onto the keyboard. The walls are closing in, not physically but acoustically, the silence crushing everything into a single point. I can see Marcus standing in the corner of my living room. He's smiling his real smile, holding out his hand to me. I know it's not really him. I know it's just the hunger wearing his face. But God, I've missed him. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of the fear, the constant vigilance, the noise I surround myself with. Maybe if I go to him, it will be over. Maybe if I let the silence take me, it will finally be satisfied. Maybe I'll see the real Marcus again, wherever he is now, or maybe that's just what it wants me to think. The pressure peaks. My vision goes dark at the edges. I can feel the silence in my lungs, thick and choking. I reach for Marcus's hand. The document ends there. It was found on a laptop in an apartment in Portland, Oregon, uploaded to a horror story form with a timestamp of 3:47 a.m. The apartment's tenant, Chloe Martinson, was reported missing by her landlord 2 days later. Police found the apartment locked from the inside, windows sealed. The TV and radio were both on, turned up to maximum volume. Ms. Martinson has not been found. The search is ongoing.